The entire empire had climbed the black steps of Mount Veyrath to watch a slave Omega die. They came wrapped in crimson cloaks and jeweled furs, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks shaped like dragon skulls, their whispers soft as knives beneath the thunder of the volcano. Above them, the sacred mountain breathed smoke into a storm-dark sky, its mouth glowing red, as if some ancient beast beneath the world had opened one burning eye. At the center of the obsidian altar stood Elara, barefoot, chained at the wrists with dragon silver, her thin white shift already stained with ash. No one had given her a cloak against the cold wind. No one had allowed her to wash the soot from her face. They wanted the Empire to see exactly what she was before the fire took her. A slave Omega from the lower dens, a girl with no family name, no pack protection, no dragon mark, and no worth beyond the blood they intended to spill. The priest said the dragons were dying because the mountain was hungry. The council said the Empire needed a life humble enough to appease the old fire without insulting the throne. The nobles said an Omega's death was a small price for the survival of the realm. But Elara knew the truth hidden beneath every polished word. They had not chosen her because she was guilty. They had chosen her because no one would rise to defend her. She stood still while the crowd watched, because stillness was the last dignity left to her. All her life, they had mistaken silence for surrender. In the kitchens beneath the Dragon Palace, they had taught her to lower her eyes before nobles. In the stables, they had taught her to scrub blood from saddles after royal hunts. In the lower ash pits, where slave Omegas slept beside cooling furnaces, they had taught her that a girl without a pack survived by becoming invisible. Yet invisibility had failed her. The Empire had finally seen her, and only because it needed something weak enough to destroy. A horn sounded from the upper stair. The murmuring died at once. The Dragon King had arrived. Kale Draven moved through the crowd, like a blade drawn from darkness. He wore no crown, only black armor carved with old flame runes, and a cloak of midnight scales that shifted faintly with every step. His hair was dark, his face hard and beautiful in a way that made people look away too quickly, as if staring too long might invite punishment. Behind him came his royal guard, men sworn to flame and fang, but none of them carried the same terror he did. Kale did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to bear a weapon. The Empire bent around him because every soul on that mountain knew he was the last living ruler whose blood could command dragons. Or so they believed. Elara had seen him only once before, months ago from behind a stable pillar, when his war dragon had returned wounded from the northern border. The beast had been enormous, black-scaled, and trembling with pain, its golden eyes clouded by sickness. He had placed one bare hand against its snout, and for a single moment, Elara had seen the king's mask crack. Not with weakness, with grief. Then the healers had surrounded him. The guards had dragged everyone back, and the moment had vanished, like a spark in rain. Now his eyes found her across the altar. Elara expected disgust. Pity, perhaps, if kings were capable of such a thing. But Kale Draven looked at her as though he had heard a sound no one else could hear. The High Counselor stepped forward before the silence could deepen. Lord Veyrath was tall and silver-haired, his robes embroidered with the 7 sacred flames of the Empire. His smile was solemn enough to convince fools, and sharp enough to frighten the wise. "Your Majesty," he called, bowing low. "The offering has been prepared. By old law and royal sanction, this Omega shall be given to Veyrath's heart. Her blood will calm the mountain. Her death will restore the dragons." The crowd lowered its heads. The priests lifted their black staffs. The volcano rumbled beneath them. Kale did not answer immediately. His gaze remained on Elara's face, then dropped to the chains around her wrists. Something dark passed behind his eyes. Who named her guilty? Veyrath's smile did not move. Guilt is not required for sacred balance. Elara felt the words strike harder than any blow she had endured. Guilt is not required. That was the law of her life. No guilt had been required when her mother disappeared into the ash mines. No guilt had been required when the palace steward branded Elara's shoulder with the slave mark at 13. No guilt had been required when noble children practiced commands on her, just to laugh when her Omega instincts made her kneel. The world did not need her to deserve pain. It only needed her to be low enough that pain could find her easily. Kale stepped closer to the altar. The dragon's silver chains tightened without anyone touching them, reacting to the power in his blood. Elara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from flinching. The taste of blood filled her mouth, copper and heat. The king noticed. His jaw hardened. For one dangerous heartbeat, Elara thought he might stop it. Not because he cared for her. Kings did not care for slave girls. But perhaps because some buried instinct in him recognized cruelty, dressed as ceremony. Then Lord Veyrath leaned close enough to speak, only for the throne. The dragons failed to rise this morning, Majesty. 3 more hatchlings turned cold in their shells. If the people do not see blood given today, they will say the mountain has rejected you. A wind moved across the altar. Kyle's expression closed. There it was. The chain around his throat, invisible but stronger than hers. A king could command armies and still be cornered by fear. A throne could be made of gold and still sit over a grave. Kale looked at Elara again, and this time she understood the terrible truth. He was not untouched by her death, but he would allow it. The high priestess raised a curved blade, made from volcanic glass. Omega Elara of the Ash Dens, she declared, her voice carrying across the mountain. You have been chosen by the Empire to return warmth to the sacred bloodline. Kneel, and receive the honor of flame. Elara did not kneel. The crowd shifted. The guards reached for their weapons. Elara's heart hammered so violently she could barely breathe, but she kept her spine straight. She had kneeled in kitchens, in stables, in corridors slick with melted snow. She had kneeled to survive, but she would not kneel to make her murder look holy. The priestess's eyes narrowed. Kneel. Elara lifted her chin. Her voice came rough from disuse, but it did not break. If the fire wants me, let it take me standing. A ripple went through the nobles. Someone gasped. Someone laughed in disbelief. Lord Veyrath's face turned cold, but Kale Draven did not laugh. The volcano answered. It began as a sound too deep to be thunder. The altar trembled beneath Elara's feet. The chains around her wrists heated until pain flashed up her arms. Yet beneath the pain came something stranger. A pulse, slow and vast, like a heartbeat buried under stone. Elara looked toward the crater. The lava below shifted, not bubbled, not surged, shifted, as if something underneath had turned in its sleep. The priestess froze. The old runes carved into the altar flickered once, then went dark. Lord Veyrath's eyes sharpened with panic so brief most would have missed it. Kale did not. His head turned toward the counselor, and for the first time, suspicion cut through the king's guarded face. Then the chains on Elara's wrists began to glow. Not silver, gold. The crowd recoiled. Dragon silver was not supposed to change color. It was forged to bind witches, traitors, and beasts of corrupted flame. It answered only to royal blood and old fire. Yet around Elara's wrists, the metal softened like wax, glowing brighter with every breath she took. The high priestess stumbled back. That is impossible. Elara barely heard her. The heat in her veins had become a voice without words. It rose through her bones, through the slave brand on her shoulder, through every scar she had hidden beneath rough cloth. It did not feel like power. Not yet. It felt like memory. A memory too old to belong to her. Kyle reached the base of the altar. Stop the rite. Lord Veyrath's voice snapped like a whip. The rite has begun. If it is broken, the mountain will rage. The mountain is already answering her. She is a vessel of corruption. Elara turned at that word. Corruption. She had heard it in whispers all week, when the dying hatchlings had failed to breathe flame, when the palace healers had found black ash around the nursery doors, when the council needed a body to place beneath the blame. They had called her cursed because she had once touched a cold dragon egg and wept over it. They had called her unclean because the egg had warmed under her palm. She had told no one. Someone had seen. The priestess raised the blade again, but her hands were shaking now. "Throw her in." The guards seized Elara from behind. Kael moved. A growl tore from him, low and inhuman, and every wolf-blooded soldier on the mountain stiffened. Though this was a dragon empire, old wolf lines still served beneath the throne, bound by ancient treaties of fang and flame. Those men felt the command in his sound and faltered. But Lord Veyrath had prepared for hesitation. His own council guard stepped forward, armored in white scale, deafened by ritual wax, and trained to obey hand signs alone. They grabbed Elara's chains and dragged her toward the crater. Pain ripped through her shoulders. Her bare feet scraped over obsidian. The crowd blurred into masks and open mouths. The heat from the volcano struck her face so fiercely her tears dried before they could fall. For one moment, she looked back, not at the priests, not at the council, at the Dragon King. Kael stood surrounded by his own guards, and the council's blades, trapped in the space between command and consequence. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them that was neither love nor trust. It was recognition sharpened by helplessness. He saw her. Too late, perhaps, but he saw her. Elara hated him for it. It would have been easier if he had looked away. The guards shoved her over the edge. The world became fire. She fell without screaming. The wind tore the breath from her throat. Heat swallowed sight, sound, thought. Above her, the rim of the crater shrank into a circle of dark figures and red sky. For a heartbeat, Elara felt weightless, suspended. Then the lava rose to meet her. It should have devoured her. Instead, it opened. Elara plunged into molten light, and the mountain closed over her like a womb. Far above, the Empire waited for smoke, for screams, for the satisfying silence of a sacrifice completed. But beneath the lava, Elara did not burn. She sank through fire that moved around her skin like warm water. Her chains dissolved. Her slave mark cracked open with a flash of gold. The pain was unbearable, but it was not the pain of dying. It was the pain of something buried too long forcing its way back into the world. In the depths below the volcano, an eye opened. It was larger than the palace gates. Ancien, golden, lonely. And when it looked at Elara, the fire around her bowed. A voice entered her blood. Older than kings, older than councils, older than the empire that had thrown her away. "Daughter of the first flame," it whispered. "At last, they have returned you to me." Above the mountain, Mount Veyrath exploded. The explosion split the night apart. Fire tore from Mount Veyrath in a pillar so vast it turned the clouds red for miles across the empire. Nobles screamed and threw themselves down the black stairways while burning stone rained across the sacred terraces. Priests lost their footing and vanished into smoke. The obsidian altar cracked directly through its center, ancient runes shattering like brittle bone beneath the force rising from the depths below. And at the edge of the crater, Dragon King Kael Draven did the one thing no ruler of Veyrath had done in centuries. He ran toward the fire. "Your Majesty," his captain shouted behind him, "the mountain is collapsing." Kael ignored him. Heat slammed against his armor hard enough to blister exposed skin, but he kept moving until he stood at the broken edge of the crater itself. Lava surged below like a living sea, violent and impossible, yet through the inferno he saw it one shape suspended within the molten glow. A girl, alive. For one impossible heartbeat, Elara floated beneath the lava as though the mountain itself cradled her. Golden light wrapped around her body. The chains that had bound her were gone. Her white shift had burned away into drifting ash, replaced by something darker, ancient scales of molten gold slowly forming across her skin like living armor. Then the volcano roared again. The lava folded inward. Something enormous moved beneath it. The crowd saw only fragments. The curve of black horns larger than towers, eyes burning beneath the magma, a shadow vast enough to swallow the crater whole. Panic exploded across the terraces. The dragon god. No imposible. Seal the mountain. Priests fell to their knees in terror. Some nobles fled outright. Others stared in frozen horror at the thing awakening beneath the volcano, because every child in the empire knew the forbidden legend. The last dragon god had died 1,000 years ago. But legends, Kael realized, had lied before. Lord Veyrath stepped backward, his composure finally cracking. "No," he whispered. "It cannot wake." Kael turned sharply toward him. "Not cannot exist. Cannot wake." The distinction struck like a blade. "You knew," Kael said quietly. Veyrath's expression hardened instantly. "Majesty, we must retreat now. If the beast rises fully, the capital itself will burn." But Kael barely heard him. His gaze had returned to the crater. Elara was falling deeper, not sinking helplessly. Descending, as if the fire itself carried her somewhere beneath the mountain. Then she vanished entirely beneath the molten surface. Kael moved without thinking. Gasps erupted from the court, as the Dragon King stripped off his scaled cloak and stepped onto the fractured rim of the volcano. His guards lunged for him immediately. "Majesty, you cannot enter the sacred fire." Kael ripped free of their grip. His eyes never left the lava below. Something inside him was pulling toward the girl with terrifying force. Not desire, not yet, but something older. His dragon, silent and dying for months, had suddenly awakened the moment Elara touched the fire. Not healed, awakened. For the first time in nearly a year, Kael could feel it beneath his ribs again. Restless, furious, hungry, alive. Then pain hit him. A violent surge ripped through his chest, dropping him to one knee at the edge of the crater. Black veins crawled briefly beneath the skin of his throat before disappearing again. Several nearby nobles recoiled in fear. They had seen. Kael pressed one hand against the stone, breathing hard. His dragon was fighting itself inside him again, clawing at the fragile chains restraining its monstrous form. The curse was worsening. Lord Farron saw it too, and smiled. Only slightly. Only for an instant. But Kael caught it. The counselor stepped forward carefully, lowering his voice. "Your Majesty, the people must not witness weakness tonight. Let us escort you back to the palace before rumors spread." Kael slowly lifted his gaze toward him. "You fed me lies. The Empire needed stability. You sacrificed that girl, knowing something slept beneath this mountain." Veyrath's silver eyes darkened. "And now you understand why she had to die." Another roar thundered beneath the volcano. This time the mountain answered with a tremor violent enough to send entire stairways collapsing into the lava. The crowd panicked completely. Guards struggled to evacuate nobles through choking ash, while priests shouted broken prayers into the storm. Kael rose slowly to his feet. "She survived." Veyrath's voice sharpened. For now, the meaning beneath those words was unmistakable. The counselor still intended to kill her. Before Kael could answer, a deafening crack split the crater open. Lava burst upward in spirals of gold and crimson, and from the center of the eruption came a sound no living soul in the Empire had heard in centuries. A dragon's cry, not the roar of ordinary war dragons. This sound was older, deeper. It carried through bone and blood like divine judgment itself. Every dragon chained upon the royal terraces answered instantly. The beasts that had been weak for months suddenly jerked against their restraints, eyes blazing wide. Some dropped to their knees. Others began snarling toward the mountain, as if recognizing a ruler long thought dead. Kael's own dragon nearly tore free inside his chest. Then silence fell, heavy, breathless, waiting. Far below the crater, beneath layers of molten stone and forgotten ruins, Elara opened her eyes. She lay upon black glass beside a lake of fire. The air shimmered gold around her, unbearably hot, yet strangely gentle against her skin. Her body no longer hurt. The bruises from the chains had vanished. The slave brand burned faintly on her shoulder, cracked directly through its center by lines of glowing molten light. And before her stood the creature from the depths. Not fully dragon, not fully god. Its body was vast enough that she could not see all of it at once. Black scales covered limbs larger than castle towers. Molten gold flowed beneath cracks in its chest like blood made of stars. Ancient horns curved backward from a skull lined with scars older than kingdoms. Yet its eyes, its terrible burning eyes, held exhaustion deeper than rage. The dragon lowered its head toward her. The movement shook the cavern. Elara should have fled. She should have trembled in terror. Instead, she stared upward in stunned silence, because despite its monstrous size, the creature looked wounded, lonely, abandoned. "You are small," the dragon rumbled at last. Its voice was not heard with ears alone. It moved through her bones. Elara swallowed hard. "Am I dead?" The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, almost amused. "If you were dead, child, the mountain would not be screaming." Only then did Elara realize the volcano above them was still shaking violently. She pushed herself upright carefully. Strange golden patterns glowed faintly beneath her skin now, appearing and vanishing like embers under ash. Fear crept slowly into her chest. "What are you?" she whispered. The dragon stared at her for a very long time. Then the cavern darkened. Images suddenly flooded the air around them. Not illusions, but memories carved into flame itself. Elara gasped as visions unfolded across the molten walls. An empire of dragons soaring beneath crimson skies. A woman standing atop the mountain wearing armor of living gold. Her hair burned like fire. Her eyes blazed with the same molten light now flickering beneath Elara's skin. The dragons bowed to her, not out of fear, out of loyalty. "The first Fire Dragon Empress," the creature said quietly. "Your blood remembers her." Though the Empire tried to erase her name, the vision changed violently. War, a throne room, drowned in blood. Men in royal armor driving black spears into dragons chained beneath the palace. A crown stolen. A queen betrayed. Elara stumbled backward in horror. "No, the line of the true empress was hunted to extinction," the dragon continued. "Their children slaughtered. Their history burned. Those who survived were branded as slaves, so none would remember what they were." Elara's breath stopped. The slave mark on her shoulder burned hotter. "No," she repeated weakly. "That cannot be true." The dragon lowered its head closer. "Then why did the sacred fire refuse to consume you?" She had no answer. All her life, she had believed herself unwanted by the world itself. An Omega born without scent, strong enough for a pack. A servant no dragon ever noticed. A girl with no bloodline worth naming. But beneath the mountain, ancient fire was calling her royal. The cavern trembled again. This time the dragon's expression darkened. "He is coming." Elara looked up sharply. "Who?" The dragon did not answer immediately. Instead, it studied her with something unexpectedly sorrowful in its ancient gaze. "The king above fears what he is becoming," it murmured. "But he should fear the men beside his throne far more." Then another voice echoed faintly through the molten tunnels above. "Elara, Kyle." The sound of her name in his voice startled her more than the dragon itself had. Not because of tenderness, because of desperation. The dragon's eyes narrowed. "Interesting." Elara's pulse quickened. "Why is he here?" "Because his soul recognized yours the moment the fire touched you." The cavern shook violently as stone cracked somewhere above. The dragon slowly unfolded one enormous claw. Resting within it was something wrapped in molten light. A crown, not jeweled, forged from black dragon bone and living gold flame. The moment Elara saw it, pain shot through her chest so fiercely she nearly collapsed. Memories, not her own, flashed behind her eyes. Dragons crying beneath burning skies. A queen kneeling in blood. A mountain swallowing fire to protect the last god beneath the world. "The throne was never meant for his bloodline," the dragon said softly. "And when the Empire discovers what you are, they will try to kill you before the mountain crowns you itself." Far above them, another explosion thundered through Mount Veyrath, and this time, the entire capital heard it. Ash fell over the capital like black snow. From the upper towers of Veyrath Palace, Nobles watched the sacred mountain bleed rivers of fire down its ancient cliffs, while alarm bells rang through every district below. The Empire had not seen Mount Veyrath awaken like this in centuries. Markets emptied, temples filled with frightened prayers. Dragon riders struggled to control beasts, suddenly refusing commands. Even the skies felt wrong, thick with smoke and ancient heat, as though something buried beneath the kingdom had opened its eyes after 1,000 years of silence. Inside the throne hall, fear moved more quietly. It hid behind lowered voices and careful expressions. "The people are panicking," one council member whispered. They saw the mountain answer her. "If word spreads that the sacrifice survived, then we make certain no word spreads," Lord Veyrath said calmly. The royal council fell silent immediately. He stood before the massive black windows overlooking the burning mountain, silver robes untouched by ash, despite the chaos outside. His hands rested loosely behind his back, but tension sharpened every line of his posture. The explosion had ruined months of careful planning, perhaps years. Still, he was not afraid yet. Not until the dragon god fully awakened. A guard entered hurriedly and dropped to one knee. "Your Grace, the king has not returned from the mountain." Several counselors exchanged alarmed looks. Veyrath did not move. "And the girl?" he asked. The guard hesitated. "No remains have been recovered." The room darkened, not literally. Yet somehow the firelight inside the hall seemed colder after those words. Veyrath turned slowly from the window. "Then we proceed to the second measure." One of the older nobles stiffened. "You truly believe she carries the bloodline?" "I believe," Veyrath said carefully, "that the mountain recognized her." No one answered, because that possibility terrified them all. The throne of Veyrath had ruled for nearly 900 years under House Draven. The Empire believed the Dragon Kings had been chosen by sacred flame itself. But hidden beneath official histories was a truth few living souls knew. The Draven line had not inherited the throne peacefully. They had taken it, and the bloodline they destroyed had once commanded dragons like gods. Veyrath remembered the old records too clearly. Children burned in hidden chambers, women dragged from temples. Royal heirs hunted through ash forests until none remained alive enough to threaten the crown. The Empire had called it purification, but bloodlines as ancient as the Fire Empresses rarely vanished quietly. Now the mountain had answered a slave Omega, and the dragon beneath Veyrath had awakened. A cold unease crept through the council chamber. "Find the girl," Veyrath ordered softly. "Before the king does." Far beneath the volcano, Elara stared at the dragon crown, resting within the creature's claw. The gold flame woven through the black bone moved like living fire. Every instinct inside her screamed not to touch it. Yet another feeling, deeper and stranger, whispered that the crown already belonged to her. She stepped backward instead. "I don't want it." The dragon watched her carefully. "That is why the mountain allowed you to survive." Elara shook her head. "You are wrong. I am not a queen. I scrubbed ash from stable floors. I slept beside furnaces. I don't even know who my parents were." The dragon's enormous gaze softened unexpectedly. "Blood remembers what fear tries to bury." The words struck too close. All her life, Elara had survived by making herself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. Hope was dangerous for girls born in chains, because hope encouraged rebellion, and rebellion shortened lives. She had learned not to ask questions about the strange dreams that sometimes woke her at night, the dreams of burning wings and women crowned in fire. She had learned not to speak about the heat that pulsed strangely beneath her skin whenever dragons came near. And she had learned never to believe she could belong anywhere. Now the mountain itself was trying to hand her a crown. The cavern trembled again. Dust fell from the ceiling above, as distant impacts echoed through the tunnels. Someone was descending toward them through the volcanic passageways. Coil. Elara felt it before she heard him. Not through magic, through instinct. The dragon noticed her reaction instantly. "Your heart races for the king already?" Elara stiffened. "No, A rumbling sound echoed from the creature's chest. Realization struck her a second later. The dragon was laughing. Heat rushed into her face despite the suffocating warmth of the cavern. "He let them throw me into the fire. And yet," the dragon said quietly, "you looked at him before you fell." Elara opened her mouth to deny it. No words came, because it was true. Out of all the faces above the crater, she had looked only at him, not because she trusted him, perhaps because some part of her had wanted him to stop it, wanted someone powerful enough to end her suffering to finally choose differently. But Kael had not stopped them. That wound still burned hotter than the mountain around her. The dragon's expression darkened slightly. Kings raised inside cages often mistake chains for duty. Before Elara could answer, a violent crack echoed through the cavern entrance. Stone exploded inward. Kael Draven emerged from the smoke. For one suspended heartbeat, neither moved. The Dragon King stood at the edge of the cavern, breathing hard, black armor scorched from heat and climbing ash. Blood ran from cuts across his hands where volcanic stone had ripped his skin open during the descent. Yet none of that held Elara's attention. His eyes did. Gold, not fully human anymore. The moment Kael saw her alive beside the dragon god, something dangerous flickered across his face, not relief exactly, but something near enough to frighten him. Then he noticed the crown, and his expression changed completely. The cavern temperature dropped. The dragon shifted behind Elara with a low warning growl that shook molten stone from the ceiling. Kael slowly reached for the sword at his side. "Move away from her." Elara blinked in confusion. The dragon god's eyes narrowed. Still, obedient to stolen blood, Kael's jaw tightened instantly. "I know what you are." "No," the creature replied. "You know what your ancestors taught you to fear." The air between them turned sharp as drawn steel. Elara felt suddenly trapped between two ancient forces, neither willing to yield. The dragon's fire swelled through the cavern while Kael's own power pushed violently against it. Golden cracks spread beneath the king's boots. Then Kael's control slipped. Pain hit him without warning. He staggered forward sharply, one hand bracing against the stone wall as black veins crawled visibly across his throat and jaw this time. A low growl escaped him. Not human, not fully dragon either. Elara froze. The dragon god watched silently. So the rot has nearly consumed him already. Kael's head snapped upward. Fury flashed through his face. Silence. But another wave struck him before he could recover. His body convulsed violently. A burst of black scales tore briefly across one side of his neck before disappearing again. Elara stumbled backward in shock. The king's breathing turned ragged, uneven, as though something monstrous inside him was trying to claw its way free. And suddenly she understood. The rumors, the dying dragons, the reason Kael always wore high collars and gloves during court. The Dragon King was cursed. Kael realized too late that she had seen it. Their eyes locked. For the first time since she had known him, true fear crossed his face. Not fear of battle, fear of exposure. "Elara," he said sharply, voice roughening into something dangerous. "Do not come closer." But she already had, without thinking, without understanding why. Perhaps because she recognized the same loneliness in him that had lived inside her for years. Kael tried to pull away as she approached, but another spasm bent him nearly to one knee. A growl ripped from his throat, deeper now, almost feral. Heat rolled off his body in violent waves. The black veins spreading beneath his skin looked almost alive. The dragon god watched with ancient knowing. He hides the beast, because the throne would destroy him if they saw what he has become. Kael's eyes blazed toward the creature. Enough. Elara deserves truth, if the mountain intends to bind your fates. The cavern went still. Bind your fates. Elara's pulse stumbled. Kael's expression hardened instantly into something unreadable. "There will be no bond." The dragon god tilted its massive head slightly. "You felt her before you saw her." Silence. Kael said nothing, because denial would have been pointless. From the moment Elara stepped onto the sacrificial altar, something inside him had awakened violently. His dragon had recognized her instantly, reacting with hunger, fury, and desperate need all at once. He had tried to bury it beneath duty, beneath caution, beneath the terror of what she might truly be. But his instincts had only worsened after she fell into the fire. Now, standing near her inside the mountain, Kael could barely breathe through the force of it. The heat surrounding Elara called to him, not like flame, like home, and that frightened him more than the curse ever had. Elara noticed the way his eyes followed her now, conflicted and almost angry. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Kael looked away immediately. "You should fear me." The answer came too quickly, too honestly. Elara frowned slightly. "Because of the curse?" A shadow crossed his face. The dragon god answered for him. "The royal bloodline has been rotting for generations. Their dragons no longer recognize them fully. That thing inside him is not merely sickness. It is rejection." Kael's silence confirmed it. Elara stared at him. The mighty dragon king, the ruler feared across the empire. And beneath the armor, beneath the cold command and sharpened control, his own blood was slowly turning against him. Something inside her chest tightened painfully. "You knew?" she whispered. Kael laughed once, bitter and exhausted. "I know every hour." He straightened slowly despite the pain still visible in his body. "The court believes the dragons are dying because the gods are angry. The truth is simpler." His eyes darkened. "The throne itself is poisoned." The cavern trembled again, but this time it was not the volcano. Footsteps echoed faintly through the upper tunnels. "Amelmin." Kael heard them first. His expression sharpened instantly. "The council followed me." The dragon god's molten eyes narrowed. "Then the hunt begins sooner than expected." Elara's pulse quickened. "They're coming here? They will not leave witnesses alive," Kael said grimly. Something cold moved through her then. Not panic, understanding. The council had not sacrificed her to save dragons. They had tried to bury a bloodline, and now they would kill anyone who learned the truth. Above them, steel rang faintly against stone. The soldiers were close. The first arrow struck the cavern wall inches from Elara's throat. Kael moved instantly. He caught her arm and dragged her backward just as armored soldiers poured through the volcanic passage above. White-scale guards flooded the tunnel entrance, carrying dragon steel spears etched with flame wards, their faces hidden beneath ceremonial helms. They were not royal soldiers, loyal to the crown. They belonged to the council. Lord Veyrath stepped into view behind them, silver robes untouched by ash despite the brutal climb through the mountain. His pale gaze swept across the cavern and stopped on Elara. Not surprise. Recognition. For the first time since meeting him, Elara saw genuine fear behind the counselor's composed face. Then his eyes shifted toward the dragon god rising behind her. The color drained from him. "So the legends were true," he whispered. The dragon's molten eyes narrowed to slits. "You smell like the men who slaughtered my queen." Several guards faltered immediately. Veyrath recovered faster. "Kill the girl," he ordered coldly. Now, the soldiers obeyed. Spears flashed forward. Kael's sword erupted from its sheath in a burst of black flame. Steel screamed against steel as he intercepted the first strike inches from Elara's chest. The impact shook the cavern hard enough to send molten rock raining from above. Kael twisted violently, disarming one soldier before driving his blade through another's armor. But there were too many. They surged around him in disciplined formation, forcing him away from Elara step by step. These were not ordinary guards. Veyrath had brought execution hunters' men, trained specifically to kill corrupted dragonbloods before they could transform. Kael realized the truth too late. The council had been preparing for this possibility long before tonight. "Elara!" he shouted while parrying another spear thrust. "Run!" She froze. Not because she wanted to stay, because the dragon god behind her had suddenly lowered its head sharply toward the tunnel walls. The molten stone was moving. Ancient runes hidden beneath centuries of ash began glowing one by one throughout the cavern. Gold fire raced through cracks in the rock like veins awakening beneath dead skin. The entire mountain seemed to inhale. Every soldier stopped. The dragon god spoke a single word in a language older than empires. The volcano obeyed. The cavern exploded. Walls of molten stone crashed upward between Elara and the attacking guards. Soldiers screamed as rivers of fire split their formation apart. One man vanished beneath collapsing rock. Another dropped his spear and fled outright. Panic spread instantly through the tunnel lines. Veyrath staggered backward in horror. No, it cannot command the mountain anymore. The dragon lifted its enormous head fully now. "You buried me beneath fire," it rumbled. "Did you truly believe I slept powerless?" The volcano answered with a roar so violent the ceiling cracked open above them. Kael reached Elara through the chaos and grabbed her wrist. "Move!" She ran beside him through collapsing tunnels while the mountain shook around them like a living beast trying to wake completely. Heat surged through every passageway. Lava burst through fractures in the walls. Behind them came screams, crashing stone, and Veyrath shouting furious commands to regroup. Kael pulled Elara sharply into a narrow side tunnel, moments before a torrent of molten rock exploded through the main corridor. The blast knocked them both hard against the cavern wall. Elara gasped as Kael's body hit hers fully for the first time. Heat, not ordinary warmth. His skin burned through the layers of torn fabric between them, dangerously hot beneath the black armor. His hand around her wrist tightened reflexively as another tremor rocked the tunnel. For one suspended second, neither moved. Kael's face was inches from hers. Ash streaked his jaw. Blood ran from a cut near his temple. His eyes still glowed faintly gold beneath the darkness, wild and unstable from the curse tearing through him. And yet Elara noticed something else. He was shaking, not from fear, from control, as though touching her was forcing him to fight something violent beneath his skin. Kael released her abruptly and stepped backward. "Stay behind me." The command should have sounded cold. Instead, it sounded strained. Elara stared at him, while the mountain thundered around them. "You came after me." His jaw hardened instantly. "I came to stop the council." "That isn't what I asked." Silence. The tunnel flickered gold with distant lava light. Kael looked away first. "Elara," he said quietly, "you do not understand what happens if the court learns what you are." Her voice tightened. "I don't even know what I am." The words cut deeper than she intended. Because they were true. Sleo, Omega, Sacrifice. Every identity she had carried her entire life had shattered beneath the mountain tonight. Now ancient dragons called her royal, while the Empire hunted her like a disease. And worst of all, some buried part of her wanted to believe the fire. Kael studied her face carefully then, as though finally seeing the exhaustion beneath her defiance. The old bloodlines were not merely rulers, he said. They were bound to dragons directly, not through domination, through inheritance. His expression darkened. When House Draven seized the throne centuries ago, they kept fragments of that power through forced marriages and blood rituals, enough to maintain control, but never enough for the mountain to fully accept them. "The curse," Elara whispered. Kael nodded once. "My bloodline weakens with every generation. Dragons hatch sickly. Bonds fail. Some heirs lose control of their forms completely." His gaze turned colder. "The council hid it by blaming outsiders, rival kingdoms, forbidden magic, anything except the truth. That the throne was stolen." Kael did not answer, but silence confirmed enough. Another tremor shook the tunnel violently. This time Elara stumbled. Kael caught her automatically. The moment his hand closed around her waist, fire surged through both of them. Elara gasped sharply. Golden light flashed beneath her skin, while black scales rippled briefly across Kael's throat. The air itself seemed to tighten around them. Deep inside the mountain, something answered with a low rumble. Kael released her immediately, as though burned. The look in his eyes now frightened her far more than the soldiers had. What was that? His expression closed instantly. "Nothing. Do not lie to me." Anger flickered across his face, not at her, but at himself. You think this is some romantic fate? He snapped quietly. You have no idea what a bond with me would become. The rawness in his voice stunned her into silence. Kale turned away sharply, breathing hard again. Elara watched him carefully now. The king moved like a man carrying invisible chains inside his own body. Every controlled breath felt forced. Every moment near her seemed to strain the fragile restraint, holding the curse together. Then she noticed blood, dripping slowly from beneath his gauntlet. Not red, black. Elara, Kale said suddenly. If we reach the upper tunnels, there is an old escape path leading beneath the western cliffs. Once outside the mountain, you leave the capital immediately. She blinked. You're helping me escape? I'm trying to keep you alive. Why? Kale laughed bitterly under his breath. I'm still deciding. The answer should have angered her. Instead, it hurt, because part of her had hoped the look in his eyes meant something simpler. Before she could respond, a scream echoed faintly through the tunnels behind them. Then another. The sounds were wrong. Not battle cries. Fear. Kale's expression sharpened instantly. He stepped toward the tunnel entrance just as one surviving council guard came sprinting around the corner ahead. The soldier barely made it 3 steps before collapsing. Claw marks shredded his armor open from shoulder to hip. Elara stared in horror. Something moved in the darkness behind him. Huge. Fust. A low growl rolled through the tunnel, not dragon. Wolf. Kale's eyes widened slightly. Impossible. The creature emerged slowly from the smoke. Massive black fur. Burning gold eyes. A wolf larger than any ordinary beast, scarred heavily across its muzzle and shoulders as though it had survived centuries of war. Molten cracks glowed faintly beneath its fur like hidden fire under stone. The beast looked directly at Elara, then lowered its head. Kale went perfectly still beside her. No, he whispered. Elara frowned in confusion. What is it? The king's face had gone pale beneath the ash. That wolf died 300 years ago. The beast stepped closer. Not threatening. Protective. Behind them, more growls echoed through the mountain. Dozens. Ancient wolves were waking beneath Veyrath, and every single one was coming toward her. The growls spread through the mountain like thunder beneath stone. 1 became 3. 3 became dozens. The tunnels surrounding Elara and Kale filled with the sound of claws scraping obsidian and deep breaths rolling through the dark. Heat pulsed from the walls in uneven waves, while molten cracks brightened beneath the floor, illuminating ancient carvings long buried beneath ash. Elara stared at the giant black wolf before her. The creature lowered itself slowly onto its front legs, not in weakness, in reverence. Kale's breathing stopped. No, he said again, quieter this time. That cannot happen. The wolf ignored him completely. Its burning gaze remained fixed on Elara, as if awaiting command. Then another shape emerged from the smoke behind it. A silver she-wolf with 1 missing eye. Then a scarred gray beast larger than a warhorse. Then more. Ancient wolves filled the volcanic passageways one by one. Massive bodies moving silently through firelight until the tunnels looked less like a mountain and more like the forgotten den of dead kings. Elara stepped backward instinctively. None of them advanced toward her. Every beast bowed its head. Kale stared at the scene in open disbelief. The royal spirit wolves. Elara looked toward him sharply. Spirit wolves? They belonged to the first dragon emperors before the throne changed bloodlines. His voice had turned distant, almost stunned. The old records claimed they vanished after the war. One of the wolves growled low in its throat at that word. War. As though even death itself remembered betrayal. The black wolf stepped closer to Elara until its enormous head hovered beside her shoulder. Slowly, cautiously, she lifted one trembling hand toward it. Kyle moved instantly. Don't. Too late. The wolf pressed its forehead gently against her palm. Fire exploded through Elara's veins. Visions shattered across her mind so violently she cried out. A throne room burning beneath dragonfire. Wolves, tearing through armored soldiers. A woman crowned in gold standing beside a dragon god beneath Mount Veyrath. And blood. So much blood. Elara stumbled as the vision ended. Kale caught her before she hit the stone floor. The moment his hands touched her arms, another pulse surged between them hard enough to shake the tunnel walls. The wolves all reacted instantly. They dropped lower. Submission. Kale released her immediately, his expression darkening with alarm. The black wolf turned toward him then, and bared its teeth, not fully hostile. Warning. The message was unmistakable. Protect her. Kale's jaw tightened. I don't take commands from ghosts. The wolf's growl deepened. Elara looked between them in confusion. Why are they here? No one answered. Then the mountain answered for them. A violent tremor split the tunnel floor open nearby. Molten light burst upward through the crack, and with it came a sound like distant screaming carried through stone. The dragon god. Something was happening deeper beneath the volcano. The wolves lifted their heads sharply toward the lower caverns. Fear moved visibly through them. Not fear for themselves, fear for her. Kyle noticed it too. What is it? Elara whispered. Before he could answer, one of the silver wolves suddenly lunged toward the tunnel entrance behind them. A heartbeat later, arrows tore through the space where Elara had been standing. The ambush came fast. Council hunters poured into the tunnels from 3 separate passageways, surrounding them instantly. Unlike the earlier guards, these soldiers wore black armor marked with anti-dragon sigils carved directly into the steel. Several carried hooked chains glowing with blue flame, dragon killer weapons. Veyrath had sent his elite execution force. Take the girl alive, their commander shouted. The king if necessary. The wolves attacked first. The black spirit wolf slammed into the nearest hunter hard enough to crush armor beneath its jaws. Chaos exploded through the tunnels as ancient beasts collided with trained execution soldiers in bursts of blood and fire. Kyle drew his sword immediately. Black flame erupted along the blade. Elara had never seen him fight this closely before. He moved like violence itself. Fast, brutal, controlled only by sheer discipline. One hunter lost his weapon before realizing Kale had already cut through his throat. Another lunged with dragon steel chains only for Kyle to catch the lynx barehanded and rip the man directly into his blade. Yet even while fighting, the king kept shifting closer toward Elara, protecting her position without seeming to realize it. The hunters noticed and adapted. Separate them, the commander shouted. A blue flame chain whipped through the chaos and wrapped around Kale's arm. The effect was immediate. Kyle roared, not shouted. Roared. Black scales exploded violently across his throat and jaw as the anti-dragon fire burned through his restraint. Several nearby wolves recoiled instinctively. The hunters tightened the chain harder. Elara saw the king's control breaking in real time. His eyes turned fully gold. Claws burst from his fingertips. And beneath the sound of battle came another noise, something enormous, trying to wake inside him. The commander smiled grimly. There it is. Kale ripped one soldier apart with unnatural strength, but more chains slammed into him immediately from both sides. The blue flame spread rapidly across his armor. Majesty! One of his surviving royal guards shouted from deeper in the tunnel. Tulat. The curse finally broke. Kyle screamed. Fire detonated outward from his body in a shock wave that blasted soldiers backward into the cavern walls. Black scales erupted fully across his skin, while massive dragon horns tore through his dark hair. His spine arched violently as bones cracked beneath armor. Elara stared in horror, not because he looked monstrous, because he looked terrified. Kale was trying to hold it back, trying not to become whatever the court feared most. Another wave of transformation ripped through him. One burning wing burst partially from his back, before collapsing again into smoke and blood. The tunnel ceiling cracked above them. The hunters panicked immediately. He's turning. Kill them both. No, the commander shouted. The council needs the girl alive. A spear flew straight toward Elara's heart. Kyle moved before thought itself. Even half transformed, he crossed the distance instantly and caught the spear through his own side instead. Blood splattered across Elara's face. Black blood. The entire tunnel froze. Kael looked down at the weapon buried deep beneath his ribs. Shock flickered briefly across his monstrous features, not at the wound. At what he had just done. He had protected her instinctively. The realization hit both of them at once. Elara's chest tightened painfully. Kael staggered backward, breathing ragged now, black fire leaking from between his teeth. His eyes locked onto hers through the chaos. "Run," he growled. She didn't move. Another hunter charged toward him with a dragon killer blade. Elara reacted without thinking. The mountain answered her instantly. Gold fire exploded from beneath the stone floor. The entire tunnel erupted. Molten cracks raced through the walls while ancient runes ignited overhead in blinding light. Hunters screamed as lava burst upward beneath their feet. One man dropped his sword and fell to his knees as fire wrapped around Elara like living wings. Silence crashed through the cavern. Every wolf lowered itself immediately. Even Kai froze. Elara stood at the center of the burning tunnel, surrounded by spirals of molten gold. The slave mark on her shoulder shattered completely apart, revealing something hidden beneath it for the first time. A royal crest. Not Draven's symbol. Olda. A dragon wrapped around a crown of fire. The hunters stared in horror. The Fire Empress. "No," one whispered shakily. The bloodlines survived. Elara barely heard them. Power flooded through her body so violently it hurt. The fire did not burn her. It listened. Every pulse of fear inside her chest sent the volcano answering through the walls. Kael watched her with stunned disbelief. And beneath the shock came something more dangerous. Recognition. His dragon knew her now. Completely. Not Slave. Not Omega. Not sacrifice. Mine. The possessive instinct hit him so hard he nearly lost control again. The hunters saw his expression change. So did Elara. Then the tunnel darkened. Lord Veyrath stepped slowly through the smoke, with several more soldiers behind him. Unlike the others, he looked almost calm now, almost relieved. "There you are," he said softly. Elara felt cold despite the fire around her. Veyrath's gaze moved to the broken slave mark on her shoulder. His eyes gleamed with terrible certainty. The last heir of the Fire Dragon Empress. He smiled faintly. At last. The fire around Elara dimmed slightly, not because her power weakened, because fear touched it. Lord Veyrath walked through the burning tunnel without flinching, silver robes untouched by ash while ancient wolves snarled low around him. Behind the counselor stood more execution hunters, armed with dragonsteel chains and black crossbows, carved with anti-magic runes. Yet none of them attacked immediately, not after what they had just witnessed, not after seeing the mountain itself answer her blood. Veyrath stopped several feet away and studied Elara carefully, almost gently, as though searching her face for traces of someone long dead. Then he bowed, not deeply, not enough for respect, but enough to chill the entire cavern into silence. Even Kael went still. "You should not kneel to a slave," the king said darkly. Veyrath's gaze never left Elara. "She is not a slave." The words echoed through the tunnels like a blade unsheathed. Elara's pulse stumbled painfully. All her life, that word had been carved into her skin stronger than any name. Slave. It had followed her through ash pits and servant halls, through every order barked at her. Every punishment endured quietly because survival demanded obedience. Now the man who helped condemn her to death was looking at her like a buried ghost clawing back from the grave. Veyrath straightened slowly. "You resemble her more than I expected." Elara frowned. "Who?" For the first time, genuine emotion cracked through the counselor's calm expression. "Sarah Validir," he said softly. "The last daughter of the Fire Dragon Empress." The name struck the cavern strangely. The wolves lowered their heads. The fire in the walls pulsed. And deep inside the mountain, something ancient growled. Kael's eyes narrowed sharply. "You told the court the entire bloodline died centuries ago." "Most did." Elara stared at Veyrath, her throat tightening. "You knew my family?" The counselor finally looked at her directly. "I watched your mother die. The words hit harder than any weapon. Elara staggered slightly. KL moved toward her instinctively, but stopped himself halfway. Veyrath noticed. Of course he noticed. The counselor missed very little. She begged the mountain to spare you, he continued quietly. You were barely an infant when the royal purge began. The council ordered every surviving heir executed before the throne could be challenged again. His expression darkened faintly. Your mother fled into the ash tunnels beneath the palace, carrying you in her arms, while dragons burned above the city. Images flashed violently behind Elara's eyes. A woman running through smoke. Gold fire. Blood on stone. The memory vanished before she could grasp it fully. She died protecting you from royal hunters. Veyrath finished. I was there when they found her. Elara's breathing became uneven. You helped kill her. Silence. Veyrath did not deny it. The truth sat openly between them now, heavy and terrible. Kale's hand tightened around his sword. You slaughtered children to protect the throne. The empire was collapsing. Veyrath snapped suddenly. The dragons had already begun dividing their loyalties between bloodlines. Civil war would have destroyed everything. You murdered innocents. I preserved stability. The force behind his words shook the tunnel. For the first time, Elara understood the core of him. Veyrath was not cruel for pleasure. He genuinely believed sacrifice was necessary to maintain order. Entire bloodlines buried beneath mountains, children hunted through fire, slave brands burned onto royal skin. None of it mattered beside preserving the empire he served. That conviction made him more frightening than hatred. Kyle stepped protectively closer toward Elara despite the blood still running from his side. You used her tonight because you knew the mountain would answer her. Veyrath finally turned toward the king. Yes. The honesty stunned even the hunters behind him. Kale's eyes darkened dangerously. Why? Because your bloodline is dying. Silence crashed through the tunnel. The words landed harder than the collapsing mountain around them because everyone present knew they were true. Veyrath gestured toward Kale's partially transformed body. Black scales still crawled faintly across the king's throat, while traces of smoke drifted from the wounds in his armor. The throne has weakened for generations, the counselor continued. Dragons hatch sickly, bonds decay, madness spreads through royal heirs. His expression sharpened, and now the last Dragon King can barely contain the beast inside him. The hunters shifted uneasily. Most had never witnessed the curse directly before tonight. Elara looked toward Kale. Pain flickered across his face. Not physical pain this time. Exposure. The kind that strips dignity away piece by piece until even breathing feels humiliating. And suddenly she understood why he hid himself so fiercely from the court. Kings were not allowed weakness. Especially monstrous weakness. Veyrath's gaze slid back toward Elara. The mountain recognized your blood because it remembers the first rulers. The old line carried fire naturally. House Draven stole fragments of that power, but never enough. He looked almost tired suddenly. The empire has been rotting from that theft ever since. Then why hunt me? Elara whispered. The answer came immediately. Because if the people discover the truth, Veyrath said quietly, the kingdom burns. A deep rumble shook the cavern. The dragon god, listening. Veyrath continued carefully. Do you think the noble houses will surrender peacefully? Do you think the military will kneel simply because old blood returned? His eyes hardened. Civil war would drown this empire in dragonfire. Kale's voice turned deadly calm. So your solution was to throw her into a volcano? Yes. No hesitation. No apology. She was supposed to die before the mountain awakened. Veyrath admitted. The sacred fire should have consumed the last trace of the bloodline permanently. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. But the dragon beneath Veyrath chose differently. The wolves growled. The tunnel temperature surged sharply. Veyrath ignored it. Now we face a far greater danger. His eyes shifted between Elara and Kale, and understanding dawned coldly across Elara's chest. The bond, she whispered. Neither man answered immediately, because silence admitted enough. Veyrath exhaled slowly. If the ancient bloodline bonds itself to the current throne, the mountain may recognize the union as legitimate. His voice lowered. The Empire could stabilize again. Kyle's expression turned murderous. You do not get to decide that. No. Veyrath agreed quietly. The mountain will. Elara's pulse hammered painfully. Bunt. Mate. Queen. The words felt unreal against the memory of chains cutting into her wrists, only hours earlier. She looked toward Kale. The king refused to meet her eyes now. That hurt more than it should have. Tell me the truth, she said softly. Did you know? Kale's jaw tightened. When the fire touched you at the altar, he admitted carefully, my dragon recognized something. Something? His control cracked briefly then. You, he growled. The raw force in his voice silenced the cavern. Elara felt heat crawl beneath her skin. Kyle looked furious with himself for saying it aloud. Veyrath noticed everything. And there it is, the counselor murmured softly. The hunters behind him shifted nervously, because the atmosphere inside the tunnel had changed completely now. The ancient wolves surrounding Elara no longer viewed Kale as a threat. They watched him like a male being tested before a queen. And deep beneath the mountain, the fire itself seemed to wait. Kyle stepped forward, despite the chains of pain clearly tightening through his body again. You will not use her to fix the throne. Veyrath's expression remained unreadable. The throne may no longer care what either of us wants. Another violent tremor split the cavern. This one nearly dropped everyone to their knees. A roar thundered upward from the deepest chambers beneath Veyrath. Not the dragon god this time. Something else. Several wolves immediately backed away from the lower tunnels with ears flattened in alarm. Kale's face darkened. What was that? Veyrath looked genuinely unsettled for the first time. Then realization hit him. No. The dragon god's voice rolled through the mountain itself. The seal weakens. Every soul in the tunnel froze. Elara frowned. Seal. The cavern floor cracked open suddenly beneath them. Black fire erupted upward. Not molten gold like hers. Something darker. Corrupted. The wolves snarled violently as smoke poured from the fracture in the stone. Elara stumbled backward toward Kyle instinctively. The moment she touched him, his dragon surged beneath his skin again with dangerous force. But neither noticed, because something was climbing out of the crack. A dragon, or what remained of one. Its scales were split with glowing black fractures. Half its face looked skeletal beneath rotting flesh. Corruption leaked from its jaws like smoke while dead gold eyes locked onto Elara immediately. The hunters panicked. By the gods, it's infected. Kale shoved Elara behind him instantly despite his weakening control. Black fire spread across his arms while the monstrous shape beneath his skin pushed violently outward. The corrupted dragon lunged, then stopped abruptly, its ruined eyes fixed fully on Elara. And slowly, the creature bowed. Silence swallowed the cavern. The corrupted dragon remained bowed before Elara, its ruined body trembling as black smoke leaked from the fractures splitting its scales apart. Rot clung to it, like disease-made flesh. One torn wing dragged uselessly across the stone floor, while dead flame pulsed faintly inside its chest. Yet despite the corruption consuming it, the creature knelt. Not to Kale, to her. The hunters stared in horror. One man crossed himself with shaking fingers. Another backed away so quickly he nearly slipped into molten cracks spreading beneath the tunnel floor. Veyrath's face had gone pale. The corruption recognizes her, he whispered. Kale stood rigidly in front of Elara, sword raised despite the dragon's submission. But Elara could feel the violent conflict tearing through him now, not only because of the creature before them, because of what had awakened inside him. The black fire spreading across his skin had not faded. It was worsening. Smoke curled from beneath his armor. Jagged scales continued crawling slowly across his throat and jawline, while his breathing grew rougher with every passing second. The curse inside him was reacting to Elara's power, to the ancient wolves, to the mountain itself, and most dangerously of all, to the bond forming between them. The dragon god's voice rolled distantly through the trembling cavern. The throne awakens. Kale's control snapped slightly at those words. A low growl escaped him deeper now, less human than before. Elara turned sharply toward him. His eyes were no longer gold. They had become molten black. Fear struck her chest instantly. Not fear of him hurting her. Fear of what would happen if he lost himself completely. "Kyle, do not touch me," he said immediately. The command came strained and uneven, as though something else beneath his voice was trying to speak at the same time. The corrupted dragon lifted its ruined head suddenly and snarled toward the king. Not hatred, recognition. The creature smelled the same corruption inside him. Kyle smelled it too. His jaw clenched violently. "Everyone back." The hunters obeyed instantly. Even Veyrath took several careful steps away, because the air around the Dragon King had become unstable. Heat distorted violently around his body, while black cracks spread beneath his boots. The ancient wolves lowered themselves protectively around Elara, sensing danger. Kale staggered slightly. Another wave hit him. This one worse. Bones cracked audibly beneath his armor. One clawed hand slammed against the cavern wall hard enough to split stone apart. A ragged breath tore from his throat as black scales spread rapidly down his arms. The hunters raised weapons in panic. Veyrath snapped sharply. "Lower them." No one wanted to provoke a full transformation inside a collapsing volcano. Elara stepped forward instinctively. "He's in pain." Kyle's head whipped toward her instantly. For one terrifying heartbeat, something monstrous looked back at her through his eyes. Predatory, starving, possessive. Then his expression twisted with horror. "Stay away from me." The words nearly broke. Elara froze. Not because of the threat, because beneath the rage she heard desperation. The dragon god spoke again from the depths below. His bloodline stole flame it could not contain. Kale roared. Black fire exploded outward from his body hard enough to throw nearby hunters backward across the cavern. Several wolves snarled defensively while chunks of burning stone crashed from above. Elara shielded her face from the heat. When she looked up again, Kyle had fallen to one knee, and the monster inside him was finally visible. A massive dragon shadow towered behind him like smoke given shape. Broken horns curved backward from its skull. Black wings spread partially through the cavern despite not fully existing yet. Molten cracks split its chest like wounds that never healed. The hunters recoiled in horror. The Dragon King's beast looked corrupted. No, not corrupted. Chained. The realization struck Elara hard. This thing was not attacking randomly. It was trapped inside him, tearing itself apart against invisible restraints. Kale pressed one clawed hand against the stone floor, breathing raggedly while black fire leaked through his teeth. "Leave," he growled toward Elara. "Now." She shook her head immediately. His expression darkened with panic. "You do not understand what happens if I lose control. But you haven't. Not yet." The raw honesty in those words silenced the cavern. Elara stared at him. This feared king. This monstrous ruler wrapped in power and violence and terrifying restraint. All this time she had believed Kale's coldness came from arrogance. Now she saw the truth. He lived every moment, terrified of himself. The corrupted dragon near Elara suddenly whimpered softly. Every eye turned toward it. The creature lowered itself further, trembling violently now while black smoke continued leaking from its scales. It was dying. Elara felt it somehow. Not through words, through instinct. The dragon was suffering. Without thinking, she stepped toward it. Kale reacted instantly despite his condition. "Elara, stop!" Too late. She knelt beside the corrupted beast carefully. The smell nearly overwhelmed her burned flesh, rot, old blood, and something deeper beneath it all. Loneliness. Agony stretched across years. The dragon's ruined eyes shifted toward her weakly. Then it lowered its head into her hand. Fire surged through Elara immediately. Gold light erupted beneath her skin while molten heat raced through the cavern floor. The dragon convulsed sharply beneath her touch and screamed. Black corruption exploded outward from its body like poison ripped free violently. Hunters shouted and stumbled backward as dark fire burst against the tunnel walls. Elara cried out too. Pain ripped through her veins as visions shattered behind her eyes. Dragons chained beneath the palace. Dark rituals carved into royal flesh. Black flame forced into dragon hearts. Kael screaming, while priests held him down as a child. Elara gasped sharply and tore her hand away. The vision vanished. The dragon collapsed heavily onto the stone floor. Silent. Still. For one horrible second, Elara thought it had died. Then, golden fire flickered weakly beneath the creature's cracked scales. The corruption was gone. A stunned silence fell across the cavern. One hunter whispered shakily. She purified it. Veyrath looked genuinely shaken now. The ancient wolves began bowing lower one by one. And Kyle stared at Elara, like the world beneath his feet had just changed shape. She looked back at him slowly, heart pounding painfully. She had seen it. Not all of it, but enough. The chains, the rituals, the corruption forced into royal bloodlines generation after generation. House Draven had not simply stolen the throne. Someone had poisoned it deliberately. Kyle realized from her expression exactly what she had witnessed. His face closed instantly. Elara, who did that to you? The question echoed softly through the cavern. Kyle looked away. That answer alone was enough. Veyrath stepped forward carefully, voice lower now. The curse began nearly 2 centuries ago. The council believed controlled corruption would strengthen dragon bonds. Bitterness flickered across his face. Instead, it devoured the bloodline slowly. Elara stared at him in disbelief. You infected your own kings? To preserve the throne. The same answer. Always the same. Sacrifice for stability. Murder for order. Monsters created in the name of survival. Kale laughed suddenly. The sound held no humor at all. You wanted honesty earlier? He said quietly toward Elara. There it is. His blackened eyes lifted toward her again. Every dragon king since my grandfather has carried this thing inside them. The shadow dragon behind him shifted violently. Hungry. Angry. Awake. Kyle's breathing roughened further. I was 12 the first time I transformed. Elara's chest tightened painfully. 12? The court sealed me beneath the palace for 6 days until the beast calmed. His voice turned distant. 3 guards died. The hunters lowered their eyes uneasily. Even Veyrath looked grim. Kale stepped backward away from her again, as though trying to place distance between them before something irreversible happened. You should fear me now, he said softly. Elara looked at him for a very long time. Then, she answered, with devastating honesty. I think you've been feared enough. The cavern went completely still. Kale's expression changed. Not dramatically. Worse. Like something inside him had cracked open quietly, after enduring too much pressure for too many years. The shadow dragon behind him faltered. For the first time since emerging, the monstrous thing actually weakened. The dragon god rumbled deep beneath the mountain. Interesting. Kyle looked furious suddenly. Not at her. At himself. For reacting. Elara. Warning roughened his voice. But she stepped closer anyway. The wolves watched carefully. Veyrath watched even more carefully. And deep inside the mountain, ancient fire stirred with dangerous interest. Then the tunnel ceiling exploded. Stone crashed downward, as another corrupted dragon burst violently through the upper cavern wall, screaming in agony. Black fire poured from its jaws, while chains still dangled from one ruined leg. The creature had been imprisoned. More roars echoed from deeper beneath the palace foundations. Not one dragon. Many. Veyrath's face drained of color. No. Kale's expression hardened instantly. What did the council lock beneath this mountain? The answer came not from Veyrath, but from the dragon god itself. The empire buried its sins alive. The mountain began screaming. Not metaphorically. Not like thunder or shifting stone. Actual screams echoed through the volcanic tunnels now deep. Monstrous cries filled with agony, old enough to poison the air itself. The sound rolled upward from beneath the palace foundations, from caverns buried so deep No sunlight had touched them for centuries, and something down there was waking. The second corrupted dragon tore violently through the broken ceiling and crashed onto the cavern floor hard enough to shake the entire tunnel system. Unlike the first beast Elara had purified, this one was far larger. Chains carved with royal seals still hung from its throat and wings, chunks of flesh ripped away where iron restraints had bitten into scale and bone. Its eyes locked immediately onto Kael, then onto Elara. Black fire poured from its jaws as it snarled in confusion. The creature could smell both corruption and ancient flame at once. Kael moved in front of Elara instinctively despite his unstable transformation. "Get behind me," Elara almost argued. Then she saw the dragon's body, clearly. The chains, the wounds, the ritual scars carved into its scales. Horror crawled slowly through her chest. "These dragons," she whispered. "They imprisoned them here." Veyrath did not answer. That silence was enough. The king turned toward him sharply. "How many?" The counselor's expression remained grimly controlled. "More than 100 over the centuries." Even the hunters looked shaken now. Kael stared at Veyrath in disbelief. "You hid corrupted dragons beneath the capital? They were too dangerous to release. You should have killed them." "We tried." Another roar thundered from below. The cavern floor split open farther this time. Elara stumbled as molten cracks raced outward beneath their feet. Through the widening fractures she glimpsed movement far beneath the mountain. Massive shadows chained within endless darkness. An entire prison. The dragon god's voice rolled through the collapsing tunnels. When the throne poisoned dragon blood, the corrupted were buried beneath sacred fire, so the empire would never see what its kings became. Elara's stomach twisted violently. Not monsters born evil. Victims buried alive because the throne feared its own shame. The second corrupted dragon suddenly lunged. Hunters screamed and scattered as the beast slammed into the cavern wall above them. Stone exploded downward. One soldier disappeared beneath falling rock instantly. Kael transformed further. Black wings burst violently from his back this time, half solid and dripping smoke. Clawed hands grabbed the dragon's throat before it could reach Elara. The tunnel erupted into chaos again. But Kael was losing control faster now. Every movement looked less human, more instinctive, more dragon. He drove the corrupted beast backward with brutal force, black fire exploding around them while the cavern ceiling cracked dangerously overhead. "Elara," he roared without looking at her. "Go." She couldn't. Not because she was brave, because she saw what everyone else missed. Kael was weakening. The curse inside him reacted violently every time he used his power. Black fractures were spreading visibly beneath his skin now, pulsing up his neck and arms like corruption trying to break free permanently. He was killing himself, holding the beast back. The dragon god noticed too. His blood burns itself alive. The second corrupted dragon snapped its jaws around Kael's arm. The king roared in pain, and something inside Elara finally broke. Not fear, not helplessness. Rage. Hot and terrible and omniscient. The mountain answered instantly. Gold fire exploded through the cavern walls. Every rune surrounding Elara ignited at once while molten light spiraled violently around her body. The wolves dropped flat against the stone floor immediately, whimpering beneath the force radiating outward from her blood. Even the corrupted dragon froze. Elara stepped forward slowly through the fire. The beast released Kael instantly. Its ruined eyes locked onto her with sudden confusion. Then fear. Not fear of death. Recognition. Elara lifted one shaking hand toward it. The fire obeyed. Golden flame wrapped around the dragon's corrupted body in spiraling currents, not burning flesh but penetrating beneath it. The beast screamed violently as black corruption burst outward from old ritual wounds hidden beneath its scales. Visions hit Elara again. Dark chambers beneath the palace. Priests forcing black flame into chained dragons. Children crying. A younger Kael restrained on an obsidian altar, while council healers carved corruption marks into his skin. Elara gasped sharply. The dragon collapsed before her, purified gold flickering weakly beneath its cracked scales, and suddenly she understood the true horror. The corruption had never been accidental. It had been manufactured, fed deliberately into royal blood and dragonkind alike. Kael staggered toward her, breathing ragged. "Elara, you knew," she whispered. His expression broke. Not denial. Guilt. "They told me it was necessary," he said hoarsely. "To preserve dragon strength. To protect the Empire. You were a child. I became king, repeating the same lies." The raw self-hatred in his voice hurt worse than anger would have. Before Elara could answer, another explosion shook the mountain. Then another. The prison beneath Veyrath was collapsing. Veyrath looked upward sharply toward the fractured ceiling. For the first time, true panic entered his face. "The seals are failing." Kael rounded on him instantly. "How many dragons are imprisoned down there?" Veyrath hesitated. "Too long." Elara felt cold. "How many?" "Thousands." Silence. Even the mountain itself seemed to pause. The hunters stared at Veyrath in horror. Thousands. Not prisoners. An entire genocide, hidden beneath the throne. Kael looked physically sick. "You buried thousands of dragons alive beneath the capital? They were corrupted beyond saving. And whose fault was that?" Veyrath's composure cracked violently at last. "We did what was necessary," he shouted. "Without control, the dragons would have destroyed the Empire generations ago. The people needed stability. They needed fear." His voice shook with buried exhaustion. "You think kingdoms survive on mercy?" The words echoed through the tunnels. Kael stared at him like seeing him clearly for the first time. And perhaps he was. Because Veyrath was not simply defending political choices anymore. He was defending every atrocity committed to keep the throne standing. Every chained dragon. Every murdered bloodline. Every poisoned heir. The mountain growled. The dragon god's voice thundered upward from the depths below. Liar. The cavern exploded. The floor beneath Veyrath shattered apart as molten fire burst upward in towering spirals. Hunters screamed and scattered, while ancient runes ignited across every wall. Then, the prison beneath Veyrath opened. Roars erupted from below. Hundreds. Thousands. The sound shook the capital itself. Elara staggered as visions flooded her mind uncontrollably. Now dragons chained in darkness for centuries, starving and corrupted beneath sacred fire, while the Empire above celebrated festivals and crowned kings over their suffering. Tears burned her eyes. The mountain had never been protecting the kingdom. It had been protecting the world from what the kingdom buried. Kael grabbed her shoulders sharply before she collapsed. "Elara." She looked up at him, breathing unevenly. The king's face was ash-streaked and exhausted, black scales still spreading slowly beneath his skin. Yet despite everything happening around them, his hands held her carefully, gently, as if she were the only thing stopping him from becoming the monster the court feared. "The prison is breaking," he said tightly. "If the dragons beneath the capital escape corrupted, the city burns," she finished. Kael nodded once. Another roar thundered upward, this time much closer. A massive claw burst through the cavern floor nearby, followed by another corrupted dragon, dragging itself upward from the abyss below. Then, another shape emerged behind it, and another. The hunters panicked completely. "We can't hold them. Fall back." Veyrath looked toward the collapsing tunnels above, calculating rapidly now. Retreat. Escape. Containment. But Kael already knew. There would be no containing this anymore. Not after the mountain awakened her blood. Not after the seals broke. The Empire's sins were finally clawing their way into daylight. One corrupted dragon lunged toward the fleeing hunters. Elara reacted instinctively again. Gold fire erupted outward from her body, and every dragon stopped. The cavern fell silent except for falling ash and distant screams from below. Dozens of corrupted dragons now stared directly at her, waiting, not attacking, listening. Elara's pulse hammered painfully. She did not know how she was doing this. Only that the dragons recognized something inside her blood the world had tried to erase. The dragon god's voice rolled through the mountain once more. The throne has returned to its rightful heir. The words echoed through every tunnel. Every hunter heard them. Every wolf lowered its head. And Kael slowly dropped to one knee before her. Not because anyone commanded him to, because his dragon no longer allowed him to deny what she was. No one breathed. The sight before them felt impossible. Dragon King Kael Draven, the feared ruler of Veyrath, the man entire kingdoms bowed before, knelt in the middle of a collapsing mountain, before a former slave Omega wrapped in living gold fire. The hunters stared in disbelief. The ancient wolves lowered themselves fully against the stone floor. Even the corrupted dragons surrounding the cavern fell silent. And Elara could not move. Kael's head remained bowed. One clawed hand pressed against fractured obsidian, while black fire flickered violently around his partially transformed body. Blood dripped steadily from the spear wound still buried beneath his ribs, dark against the glowing cracks in the stone beneath him. Yet none of that shook her as much as the expression on his face when he finally looked up. Not obedience. Recognition. Something ancient inside him had surrendered to truth before the man himself could. Elara, he said quietly. Just her name. But the sound carried through her chest like heat through frozen stone. She stared at him in stunned silence, while the mountain trembled around them. All her life, powerful men had looked at her with dismissal, command, ownership, or contempt. Never this. Never like she mattered enough to undo them. Kael seemed to realize what he had done a heartbeat later. His jaw tightened sharply. Slowly, visibly, he forced himself back to his feet. The movement looked painful, not physically, emotionally. The king rebuilt his control piece by piece in front of everyone watching. Coldness returned first, then distance. Then the hard edges of the ruler feared across the empire. But Elara had already seen beneath it, and so had the others. The hunters looked shaken now. Some lowered their weapons entirely. One older soldier even stepped backward and bowed his head toward Elara without seeming aware he was doing it. Veyrath noticed immediately. Fear darkened his expression. Not fear of Elara's power. Fear of belief. Because power alone did not topple kingdoms. Faith did. And if the Empire saw the Dragon King kneel before the last heir of the Fire Empress, House Draven's rule would begin unraveling overnight. Veyrath stepped forward sharply. "Your Majesty," he said, voice carrying through the cavern. "Remember your throne." Kael's eyes turned glacial. "My throne? The Empire survives because the people obey strength," Veyrath said carefully. "If word spreads of this, of her bloodline, the noble houses will divide instantly. Rival kingdoms will invade before winter." His gaze shifted toward Elara. "Thousands will die." Elara stiffened. The words hit harder, because they weren't entirely false. She could already imagine the chaos. Civil war, dragon riders choosing sides, nobles murdering one another beneath burning skies. The capital drowning in blood because one forgotten bloodline survived. The old fear returned suddenly. Maybe she should have died in the volcano. Maybe the Empire would truly burn because she lived. Kael noticed the shift in her expression immediately. His voice hardened. "Do not put your crimes on her shoulders." Veyrath ignored him. "The mountain chose her, yes, but kingdoms are not ruled by prophecy alone." He gestured toward the dragons gathering around them. "Look around you. Corrupted beasts rising beneath the capital. Ancient seals breaking. Panic spreading across the city." His eyes sharpened. "If the Empire falls now, millions suffer." Another roar echoed upward from the prison below. Closer, this time. The dragons were climbing fast. Kael turned sharply toward the widening abyss in the cavern floor. Shadows moved endlessly below now, winged shapes dragging themselves upward through molten darkness. The prison would not hold much longer, and if thousands of corrupted dragons reached the capital, Veyrath would become a graveyard before dawn. Kael made the decision instantly. "We seal the breach. Veyrath stared at him. Impossible. Then we slow them. With what army? The counselor snapped. Half the royal guard already fled the mountain. Kael ignored him and looked toward Elara instead. The firelight reflected in his eyes strangely now, softer beneath the exhaustion and pain. Can you still control them? Elara glanced toward the surrounding dragons uncertainly. The corrupted creatures watched her silently, waiting. I don't know, she admitted. Tre. The word was not a command. Trust. That realization unsettled her more than anything else, because Kyle Draven the king taught his entire life to fear weakness, betrayal, and unstable power, was placing the survival of his kingdom into her hands, and part of her desperately wanted not to fail him. The feeling frightened her. Elara stepped carefully toward the edge of the shattered abyss. Heat surged violently upward from below. Smoke burned her lungs while endless dragon cries echoed through the darkness beneath the mountain. She could feel them down there now. Thousands of minds twisted by corruption, rage, abandonment, and centuries of pain. Not evil. Wounded. The realization nearly broke her heart. She closed her eyes. The fire beneath her skin answered instantly. Gold light spread through the cavern floor in glowing veins. Ancient runes ignited one by one across the walls, while the surrounding dragons lowered themselves further around her. Elara reached toward the abyss with trembling hands, and spoke, not in the Empire's language. Something older. The words rose naturally from her blood. The mountain answered. The prison below roared violently as molten fire spiraled upward in massive golden currents. Every corrupted dragon in the cavern froze completely. Then, slowly, they bowed. A stunned silence followed. Even Kael looked shaken. Elara opened her eyes sharply, breath catching in her throat. She could hear them now. Not voices, exactly. Feelings. Pain. Hunger. Fear. Loneliness stretched across centuries of darkness. And beneath it all, hope. The dragons recognized her, not merely as royalty, as theirs. Tears burned unexpectedly behind Elara's eyes. No one had ever belonged to her before. The mountain trembled again. This time, however, the dragons below did not surge upward. They waited, holding position beneath the abyss, as if obeying her command instinctively. Veyrath stared in disbelief. Impossible. The dragon god's voice rolled through the cavern. The blood remembers what the throne tried to erase. Kael stepped toward Elara carefully now, black wings partially folded behind him while smoke curled from the scales across his skin. The closer he moved toward her, the calmer the monstrous energy around him became. Elara noticed immediately. So did Veyrath. The counselor's face darkened. The bond stabilizes him. Silence followed. Kael's jaw tightened sharply. Elara looked toward him slowly. What does that mean? Veyrath answered before he could. The old bloodline once balanced dragon corruption naturally. If your power fully binds with his. He hesitated for the first time. The curse-consuming House Draven may disappear. The cavern fell still again. Kael looked furious. Not at the possibility, at how badly part of him wanted it. Elara saw it clearly now, beneath his restraint. The exhaustion of years spent, fighting himself every waking moment. The terror of losing control, the isolation, the endless pressure of ruling an empire while becoming less human piece by piece. And suddenly she understood something painful. Kael did not fear death most. He feared becoming a monster that would hurt others. The realization softened something inside her against her will. Kael noticed immediately. His expression turned dangerous. Elara. Warning again. Distance again, as though he sensed himself slipping every time she looked at him too gently. Before either could speak further, screams erupted from the upper tunnels. Then came the sound of steel. Kael's head snapped upward instantly. Royal soldiers. Dozens of them. The surviving palace guard finally reached the lower caverns moments later, flooding into the shattered tunnel entrances with weapons drawn. Several stopped dead at the sight awaiting them. The kneeling wolves, the corrupted dragons, the glowing fire around Elara, and their king standing beside her half transformed like a creature from nightmare. Fear spread instantly through the soldiers. Then someone arrived behind them. Queen Mother Seraphine Draven. The entire cavern changed. Even Kael stiffened visibly. Seraphine descended the broken tunnel, slowly surrounded by crimson-cloaked royal guards. Tall and severe, she wore mourning black despite no funeral being declared, silver jewels glittering against pale skin, untouched by age. Her face was beautiful in the sharp, dangerous way winter storms were beautiful. And her eyes locked onto Elara with immediate hatred. Not confusion. Recognition. Elara felt cold instantly. The Queen Mother looked toward the royal crest burning on Elara's shoulder. Then toward Kael. Understanding crossed Seraphine's face at once. "No," she whispered. Kael stepped protectively closer toward Elara, before seeming to realize he had done it. Too late. Everyone saw. Seraphine's expression hardened into something terrible. "You brought her out alive." Kael's voice turned icy. "The council lied. The council protected the throne. She was never the enemy." At that, the Queen Mother laughed softly. The sound held no warmth whatsoever. "You foolish boy," she said. "You still think this story is about the throne." Then she looked directly at Elara and spoke the words that shattered the cavern into silence. "I watched your mother burn too." The mountain went still. Even the dragons beneath the abyss quieted as though the volcano itself were listening. Elara stared at Queen Mother Seraphine, her heartbeat turning uneven beneath the crushing weight of those words. "I watched your mother burn too." The Queen Mother descended the final shattered steps slowly, black silk dragging through ash while crimson guards spread behind her in perfect formation. None of them dared raise weapons toward the dragons surrounding the cavern, but their fear saturated the air all the same. Seraphine looked only at Elara. Cold, certain, and ancient hatred sharpened every elegant line of her face. Kael stepped forward immediately. "Mother, do not call me that," while standing beside her. The words cracked through the cavern like a whip. Silence followed. Elara noticed the shift instantly. Not merely political anger, not even fear of rebellion. Something deeply personal lived beneath Seraphine's expression. The Queen Mother stopped several feet away from Elara and studied her carefully, as though searching through years of memory for traces of another woman hidden in her face. Then Seraphine smiled faintly. "You have your mother's eyes," she said softly. "That was always unfortunate for her." Kael's jaw tightened dangerously. "Enough." But Elara spoke first. "What did you do to her?" The question echoed through the cavern. Seraphine did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward the abyss where corrupted dragons waited silently beneath molten darkness. Her gaze lingered there for several long seconds before she finally spoke. "I protected this empire." Veyrath lowered his eyes slightly. Even he looked uneasy now. Elara's voice sharpened. "By murdering children?" Seraphine faced her again. "By surviving." The answer carried no remorse. Only conviction sharpened through decades of blood and fear. The Queen Mother moved closer slowly now, unbothered by the wolves growling low around Elara. "You wish to know what destroyed your bloodline?" Her pale eyes darkened. "Love did." Kael stiffened visibly. Seraphine noticed. Of course she noticed. The first Fire Empresses ruled dragons through devotion rather than dominance. She continued calmly. They bound themselves to beasts, mates, and kingdoms alike, until their emotions became weaknesses enemies could exploit. Her expression turned colder. The empire nearly collapsed because queens loved too deeply. The dragon god growled beneath the mountain. "Liar." Seraphine ignored it. "When House Draven seized the throne, we survived because we understood something the old rulers did not." Her gaze sharpened toward Elara. "Mercy creates instability." Elara felt suddenly sick, not because Seraphine sounded cruel, because she sounded sincere. Kael stepped between them fully now. "You executed innocence. I executed threats." She was a child. "And now look around you." Seraphine gestured toward the shattered cavern, the awakened dragons, the fire responding to Elara's blood. "The mountain breaks itself open for her. Ancient creatures rise from beneath the capital. The kingdom teeters on civil war. Her eyes locked onto Kael's. Tell me honestly, my son, was I wrong to fear this bloodline? Kael said nothing, because beneath the horror of everything happening around them, part of him understood her fear. That silence wounded Elara more deeply than it should have. She looked away first. The motion was small, but Kael noticed immediately. Pain crossed his face. Elara. No. Her voice shook once before hardening. She's right, isn't she? The cavern stilled again. Elara wrapped her arms around herself against sudden cold despite the fire surrounding her skin. Everywhere I go, things break apart. The mountain erupts. Dragons wake. Kingdoms panic. Her eyes burned now, not with power but exhaustion. Maybe I really should have died tonight. Kael moved toward her instantly. Don't. The force in his voice startled everyone. Elara looked up sharply. Kael's expression had changed completely. No king now. No calculated restraint. Just raw, frightening honesty. You are not the curse here. The words hit harder than fire. Something deep beneath Elara's carefully guarded walls cracked painfully open. All her life, suffering had followed her closely enough that she stopped questioning whether she deserved it. Slave girls survived by believing pain was natural, but Kael looked at her like he hated the idea itself. Seraphine saw the moment happen between them, and fear finally crossed her face. Not political fear, maternal fear, because she recognized the exact thing that once destroyed the old bloodline. Attachment. The Queen Mother's voice sharpened instantly. Kael. He ignored her completely. Elara. He said quietly, stepping closer despite the dragons and wolves surrounding them. Listen to me carefully. Black scales still flickered faintly across his skin, but his gaze never left hers. Everything beneath this mountain existed long before you did. None of this is your fault. Your kingdom is collapsing. My kingdom began collapsing generations ago. Silence. The truth hung naked between them now. Kael reached toward her slowly, not commanding, asking. Elara hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. The effect was immediate. Fire surged violently through the cavern. Gold and black flames spiraled together around their bodies while the mountain roared beneath them. Every dragon in the abyss answered at once, their cries shaking the tunnels hard enough to split entire walls apart. Kael gasped sharply. The corruption spreading beneath his skin recoiled instantly from Elara's touch. Not vanished, forced back. The black fractures crawling across his throat began fading beneath molten gold light. The entire cavern stared in stunned silence. Seraphine went pale. Veyrath whispered. The bond. Elara felt it too now. Not simply attraction. Connection. Something vast and ancient unfolding beneath skin and soul alike. She could feel Kael's pain, the constant pressure of the beast chained inside him, the years of isolation and terror hidden beneath his cold control. And Kael felt her loneliness, the quiet endurance, the aching hunger to belong somewhere without fear. The realization nearly destroyed him. His hand tightened around hers instinctively. Mine. The possessive thought slammed through him so violently he nearly lost breath. Elara felt it. Her eyes widened sharply. Kael released her immediately as though burned. Too late. Everyone saw. The mountain answered. Ancient runes exploded across the cavern walls in blinding gold fire, while the abyss below shook violently. The dragon god's voice thundered upward through every tunnel beneath Veyrath. The bond is recognized. The words echoed far beyond the mountain itself. Outside, every dragon in the capital lifted its head toward Mount Veyrath simultaneously, and bowed. Panic erupted among the royal guards. The dragons, they're kneeling. By the gods. Seraphine's composure finally shattered. No. Real fear now. Real desperation. Because the Empire was witnessing something impossible. The dragons themselves had chosen. Kael turned slowly toward his mother. And for the first time in his life, the Queen Mother looked uncertain before her son. You hid corruption beneath this kingdom, he said quietly. You slaughtered bloodlines. You buried dragons alive. His eyes darkened, all to preserve a throne already rotting from within. Seraphine's expression hardened instantly again. I did what was necessary to keep you alive. Kyle froze. The Queen Mother stepped toward him sharply now, years of buried terror finally cracking through her elegant control. You think I enjoyed any of this? She hissed. I watched your father tear servants apart when the corruption consumed him. I held you down while priests chained your dragon beneath the palace because you were screaming for death at 13 years old. Her voice broke briefly. Everything I did was to keep this kingdom from devouring you. The confession stunned the cavern. Kale stared at her in silence. For the first time, Elara saw the grief beneath Seraphine's cruelty, not excusing it, but explaining it. The Queen Mother looked toward Elara with exhausted hatred. And now, she walks out of fire, carrying the one bloodline powerful enough to unravel every sacrifice we made. Before anyone could answer, the abyss exploded. A roar unlike anything before it thundered upward through the mountain. The dragon god was rising. Massive claws of molten black stone gripped the edges of the shattered cavern, while ancient fire flooded every tunnel beneath Veyrath. The prison below had fully broken now. Thousands of dragons screamed together beneath the capital as the oldest creature in the empire finally climbed toward the world above. Hunters fell to their knees. Wolves whimpered. Even Kale's dragon recoiled instinctively. The dragon god's enormous golden eyes fixed directly on Elara, then on Kyle, and finally on Seraphine. The creature spoke one terrible sentence. The throne will choose before dawn. Then the mountain began collapsing around them. The cavern shattered. Stone screamed apart above their heads as molten cracks split through the ceiling in violent waves. Entire sections of Mount Veyrath began collapsing inward, while rivers of lava burst through ancient tunnels like veins ripped open beneath the mountain. The dragon god was rising fully. Its colossal body tore upward through the abyss beneath them, black scales glowing with molten gold beneath centuries of volcanic ash. The creature's wings unfurled slowly, vast enough to eclipse the cavern itself, while fire rolled from its jaws with every breath. The mountain bowed to it, literally. The stone beneath everyone's feet slanted downward, as if Veyrath itself bent toward the ancient god awakening at last. Kyle grabbed Elara immediately, before the collapsing ground could throw her into the abyss. She slammed against his chest hard enough to feel the violent hammering of his heart beneath cracked armor. Move, he shouted toward the others. Chaos exploded instantly. Royal guards fled toward the upper tunnels, while hunters scrambled to avoid falling debris. Several corrupted dragons surged upward from the prison below, roaring in confusion and rage as centuries of confinement ended all at once. One wrong move now, and the entire capital would burn. The dragon god climbed higher. Its molten eyes remained fixed on Elara, waiting. The meaning settled coldly into her chest. The throne will choose before dawn. Not metaphor. Not ceremony. Something ancient beneath this mountain intended to decide who ruled the empire before sunrise. Seraphine understood it too. The Queen Mother's face had gone white beneath the firelight. We must leave now, she snapped sharply. If the god reaches the capital, it already has, Kyle interrupted darkly. The tremors proved him right. Even from deep beneath Veyrath, distant screams echoed faintly down through the tunnels above. The city had seen the dragons rising. Panic was already spreading through the streets. Another section of ceiling collapsed nearby. Elara stumbled as the cavern floor tilted violently again. Kale caught her automatically, one arm wrapping around her waist to steady her against him. The contact hit both of them instantly. Heat surged between their bodies. Kyle inhaled sharply. The corruption beneath his skin recoiled again under her touch, while molten gold flickered across Elara's arms in answer. Around them, the wolves stirred restlessly. Seraphine saw everything. Fear darkened her face further. The bond strengthens too quickly, she whispered. Varen looked grim. The mountain is accelerating it. Elara frowned. What does that mean? Neither answered immediately. The dragon god did instead. The fire remembers its queen. The words rolled through the collapsing cavern like judgment itself. Kael's expression tightened sharply. Elara turned toward him. "Tell me." His jaw flexed once before he answered. The old rulers didn't form ordinary mate bonds. His voice roughened slightly. Their souls fused directly through dragon fire. Cold unease crept through her chest. And if it completes? Kael hesitated. That hesitation terrified her more than any answer. Veyrath finally spoke quietly. "Then the mountain permanently binds your bloodlines together." Silence. Elara stared at them both. Permanent. Not political alliance. Not romance. Something deeper. Ancien. Irreversible. Kael looked furious suddenly. Not at her. At fate itself. "Elara," he said sharply. "The bond is reacting to survival instincts. Nothing more." The lie sounded strained. The dragon god laughed. The cavern shook with it. "You kneel for no instinct, little king." Kael's face darkened violently. But Elara couldn't stop thinking about the way he held her now. Protective without realizing it. Like letting go had become physically difficult for him. That frightened her. Not because she disliked it. Because part of her wanted him not to let go. A deafening roar interrupted the thought. One of the corrupted dragons burst upward from the prison fully now, smashing through the upper cavern walls and disappearing toward the surface tunnels leading into the capital. Then another followed. And another. Kael's expression changed instantly. The city. The realization hit everyone at once. Thousands of civilians slept directly above a prison full of corrupted dragons. Seraphine grabbed Kael's arm sharply. "Seal the mountain." His eyes snapped toward her. "There are still dragons trapped below. They're corrupted. They're alive. Not for long if they reach the capital." The argument exploded between them, while more roars thundered upward through the tunnels. Elara watched Kael carefully. The king looked torn apart. Duty, fear, compassion, responsibility crushing against each other inside him with brutal force. And suddenly she understood something important. Kael had spent his entire life being forced to choose which suffering mattered most. That was the true burden of his crown. The dragon god lowered its massive head toward them. "Choose carefully, Dragon King. One path saves your throne. The other saves your soul." Kael's breathing roughened. Seraphine stepped closer urgently. "Listen to me. If the dragons spread through the capital, neighboring kingdoms will attack within days. The empire will collapse." Her voice sharpened. "Seal the prison now before it's too late." Kael looked toward the abyss. Toward the chained dragons still climbing desperately upward through smoke and darkness. Then toward Elara. She realized instantly what he was asking without words. What kind of ruler should he become? The question terrified her, because she knew the answer would define the rest of his life. Elara stepped slowly toward the edge of the abyss. Heat rolled upward, violently beneath her feet, while dragon cries echoed through the darkness below. She could feel them all now. Thousands of minds tangled in pain and corruption beneath the capital. Not monsters. Victims. But frightened victims could still destroy entire cities. The impossible weight of it nearly crushed her. Then she remembered the ash pits, the chains, the certainty everyone carried that sacrifice became acceptable once the powerless suffered instead of the powerful. Her eyes burned. "No more prisons," she whispered. Kael looked at her sharply. Elara turned fully toward him. "If you bury them again, this empire learns nothing." Seraphine's face hardened instantly. "Naive child." "No." Elara's voice strengthened. "You buried suffering beneath this kingdom for centuries and called it peace." Gold fire flickered beneath her skin. "Look where it led you." Silence crashed through the cavern. Even the dragon god watched her carefully now. Kael stared at Elara for a long moment. Then something inside him settled. Decision. The king turned toward the fleeing guards in the upper tunnels and roared with full command for the first time since the mountain erupted. "Open the western gates." Every soldier froze. Kael's black wings spread violently behind him, while dragon fire exploded through the cavern. "Evacuate the lower capital districts immediately." Move civilians toward the northern cliffs and clear the skies for dragon passage. Shock rippled through the guards. He wasn't sealing the prison. He was freeing it. Seraphine stepped toward him in disbelief. You would risk the kingdom for beasts? Kael faced her slowly. They became beasts because we chained them beneath our throne. The Queen Mother looked genuinely heartbroken then. Not angry. Broken. Your father said the same thing once. The words struck Kael like a blade. Before he could answer, the mountain convulsed violently. A massive explosion tore through the upper tunnels as another section of Veyrath collapsed inward. Royal guards screamed while fire flooded the passageways. The dragon god rose higher still. Its enormous body now filled nearly the entire cavern, molten gold blazing beneath ancient black scales. Every corrupted dragon in the tunnels lowered itself instinctively before it. Then the god looked toward Elara. Kulme. The single word entered her blood directly. Kael stiffened instantly. No. The dragon's molten eyes shifted toward him. She must claim the throne. Elara's pulse quickened painfully. What does that mean? The answer came softly. By dawn, the mountain will crown one ruler. If no rightful heir ascends, the fire consumes the empire entirely. Silence. Seraphine went pale again. Varen whispered. The old coronation. Kael's face darkened. That ritual was destroyed centuries ago. Not destroyed, the dragon god replied. Hidden. The creature lowered its head toward a tunnel behind the shattered abyss, a passageway previously buried beneath molten rock, now glowing faintly with ancient golden runes. The path to the throne. Elara felt the mountain pulling toward it immediately. Calling. Kael grabbed her wrist before she could move. The contact sent another pulse of heat through both of them. You are not going alone. The words came instantly. Instinctively. Elara looked up at him. Kael's expression tightened slightly, as though he hated how natural protecting her had become. The dragon god watched them with ancient amusement. The bond deepens. Kael ignored it, or tried to, but Elara felt the truth beneath his grip now. Not merely attraction, not obligation, fear of losing her. The realization stole her breath. Then screaming erupted from the capital above. The dragons had reached the city. The screams above the mountain spread through the tunnels like smoke. Veyrath was burning. From the shattered openings high along the cavern walls, crimson light flickered across the volcanic stone as dragonfire lit the night sky beyond the mountain. Bells rang wildly through the capital. Thousands of voices echoed in terror. Beneath the distant thunder of wings, the corrupted dragons had reached the city. Elara turned instinctively toward the surface tunnels. For one horrible moment, she imagined the lower districts where servant girls and laborers slept, packed together beneath narrow rooftops. The market alleys, the ash workers, the children no noble would bother rescuing first. People like her. Kael saw the fear crossing her face immediately. They're evacuating the lower districts, he said quickly, but not fast enough. Another roar split the night above them. The dragon god's molten gaze remained fixed on the hidden tunnel, glowing behind the abyss. The throne waits. Kael's jaw tightened. The city matters more than some ancient coronation. Without the coronation, the mountain will not obey her fully. The words silenced him. Elara understood before anyone else did. If I don't claim the throne, her throat tightened. The dragons won't listen. The dragon god lowered its head once. The prison dragons recognize your blood, but not yet your authority. They remain unstable. As if summoned by the warning itself, another violent tremor shook the cavern. One corrupted dragon nearby suddenly lifted its head and screamed in agony. Black fire burst across its scales while it slammed blindly against the tunnel walls, driven mad by centuries of torment. Several guards fled outright. Another dragon answered from somewhere above the capital. Then another. The city was descending into chaos. Kael looked toward the surface again, every instinct in him pulling toward his people. Elara saw the torment behind his eyes. A king wanted on the battlefield, a man being forced toward a throne room instead. The old wound inside him surfaced clearly now. Responsibility before self. Always. Even if it destroyed him. Seraphine stepped closer urgently. Kael, listen to me. If the city falls tonight, neighboring kingdoms will carve this empire apart within months. Her voice sharpened. You are still king. Kael looked at her slowly, then toward Elara, and the choice nearly broke him. Elara understood suddenly that he feared something worse than losing his throne. He feared choosing her over his kingdom. That realization hurt more deeply than she expected. Before either could speak, a young royal guard stumbled into the cavern entrance above, blood covering one side of his armor. Your Majesty, he shouted breathlessly. The eastern districts are collapsing, dragons breach the sky, bridges, we can't hold them back. A roar thundered overhead. The entire mountain shook. Dust rained down through the tunnels as distant towers cracked somewhere above the city. Kael made his decision instantly. Elara goes to the throne chamber. Every head turned sharply toward him. Seraphine stared in disbelief. You would crown her now. I would save the empire. Veyrath's expression darkened. The noble houses will never accept it. Kael's voice became lethal. Then they can kneel or burn with the rest of us. Silence crashed through the cavern. Even Elara froze. The force behind those words carried something deeper than politics now. Choice. Public choice. The first true step toward her. Kael turned toward his captain among the remaining guards. Take every surviving soldier and evacuate the northern districts. Protect civilians before noble estates. His eyes hardened. Anyone abandoning commoners to save aristocrats loses their rank permanently. The guards exchanged startled looks. No king in Veyrath's history had ever spoken that order aloud. Kael no longer seemed to care. The mountain had stripped too much truth bare tonight. He looked back toward Elara. I'll clear a path through the city, he said quietly. You reach the throne chamber before dawn. Fear tightened painfully in her chest. Alone? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kael's expression shifted instantly. Softened. Dangerously. No, he said. Then he pulled a dagger from his belt. The blade was black dragon steel, wrapped with ancient flame runes. Without hesitation, Kael sliced his palm open across the center. Blood spilled immediately, black and gold. The cavern fell silent again. Seraphine stepped forward sharply. Kael, dolate. The king pressed his bleeding hand against Elara's wrist. Fire exploded between them. Elara gasped as molten heat surged violently through her veins. Gold runes flashed beneath her skin while Kael's dragon roared inside the cavern walls. The blood spreading across her wrist transformed into a glowing mark. A bond seal. Ancien. Terrifying. The dragon god watched with visible interest now. A king's vow. Elara looked up sharply at Kael. What did you do? His voice lowered. Now the mountain recognizes you under my protection. The words sounded formal, but beneath them she felt something roar moving through the bond itself. Need. Possession. Fear. The connection between them sharpened instantly after the seal formed. Elara could feel his heartbeat faintly now, the exhaustion dragging at him beneath his control, the constant strain of the corruption chained inside his body. And Kael suddenly felt every flicker of fear inside her. The loneliness, the terrible habit of expecting abandonment. It nearly brought him to his knees. His expression darkened sharply as he pulled his hand away. Too much. Too intimate. The bond was becoming dangerous already. Seraphine looked horrified. You fool. Kael ignored her. Elara. His gaze locked onto hers completely now. Once you enter the throne chamber, the mountain will test your blood. His voice roughened slightly. It will force you to choose what kind of ruler you become. Her throat tightened. And if I fail? The dragon god answered. Then the fire consumes all claimants. Cold silence followed. The meaning was clear enough. Death. Kael stepped closer immediately. You will survive it. The certainty in his voice startled her. You don't know that. Yes, he said quietly. I do. The way he looked at her when he said it nearly unraveled something inside her completely, because no one had ever sounded certain she would survive anything before. Another explosion thundered from above. The capital was running out of time. Veyrath stepped toward the hidden throne tunnel reluctantly. The path beneath the mountain will lead directly to the old coronation chamber. His expression remained conflicted, but once the ritual begins, there is no turning back. Elara looked toward the glowing tunnel. The mountain pulled toward it harder now, calling her blood home. And for the first time in her life, she was terrified not of dying, but of becoming something powerful enough that the world could never chain her again. Kyle noticed her hesitation. He stepped closer one final time. Elara. She looked up at him. The king reached toward her slowly, fingers brushing gently against her jaw despite everyone watching. The touch was devastatingly soft for a man built from violence and restraint. "If the mountain hurts you," he said quietly, "I will tear it apart stone by stone." The promise stunned the cavern into silence. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. Veyrath looked away. Because the Dragon King had finally crossed the line he feared all night. Not duty, not alliance. Devotion. Elara felt it through the bond burning between them, and Kale realized too late that he no longer cared who saw. Then a child's scream echoed from the city above. The moment shattered instantly. Kale stepped backward, black wings unfurling fully behind him now, as dragon fire rolled beneath his skin. The king was returning to war. "Elara," he said, voice rough with restraint. "Go." She wanted to tell him to survive. The words caught painfully in her throat, because surviving had never been promised to people like them. Instead, she whispered, "Come back to me." Silence followed. Kale stared at her like she had struck directly through his armor. Then something dangerous and unbearably tender crossed his face. The king touched his forehead briefly against hers. "Un ancien dragon vow." The wolves bowed instantly around them, and without another word, Kale Draven turned toward the burning capital and leapt into the firelit sky. The moment Kyle vanished into the burning sky, the bond between them tightened painfully. Elara gasped softly. Not physical pain. Absence. The sudden distance felt wrong in a way she could not explain, as though some instinct buried beneath her blood expected him near now. The realization unsettled her deeply. Seraphine noticed. Of course she did. The Queen Mother's gaze lingered briefly on Elara's expression, before turning away sharply, something unreadable flickering behind her cold composure. "Move," she ordered the remaining guards. "The city will not survive another hour if the throne remains empty." The hidden tunnel behind the abyss glowed brighter now, ancient runes pulsing gold beneath layers of volcanic stone. Heat rolled steadily from its depths, not violent like the lava chambers, but controlled, purposeful, like a heartbeat waiting beneath the mountain. Elara stared toward it uneasily. "The throne waits." The dragon god's voice echoed one final time through the cavern before the creature turned its massive head toward the surface tunnels leading to the capital. Its molten eyes burned like suns within darkness. Then the ancient god spread its wings. The force shattered entire sections of the cavern ceiling. With a roar that shook the empire itself, the dragon launched upward through Mount Veyrath toward the burning city above. Silence followed in its wake. Not true silence. Far above them came distant screams, collapsing stone, and dragonfire tearing through the night. But down here beneath the mountain, everything felt suspended, waiting. Veyrath stepped beside Elara reluctantly. The old throne chamber lies directly beneath the capital. His expression remained tense. No living ruler has entered it in centuries. Seraphine laughed softly without humor, because no living ruler carried the blood to survive it. Elara looked sharply toward her. The Queen Mother met her gaze calmly now, though exhaustion shadowed her elegant features for the first time. "You think I wanted this?" Seraphine asked quietly. Elara said nothing. Seraphine's eyes drifted toward the distant sounds of chaos above them. "When I married into House Draven, your bloodline was already legend. Ghost stories whispered to frighten noble children." Bitterness touched her voice. "Then I gave birth to a son whose dragon nearly killed him before he could walk." The words chilled the tunnel. Veyrath lowered his eyes. Seraphine continued walking toward the glowing passageway. The council promised the corruption could be controlled, managed. They promised stronger heirs, stronger dragons. Her mouth tightened. Instead, they created kings who spent their lives terrified of themselves. Elara's chest ached unexpectedly. Kyle, at 13, chained beneath the palace, screaming for death. The image would not leave her. Seraphine noticed the shift in her expression. You pity him. He suffered. He is dangerous. So are you. The Queen Mother stopped walking. For one suspended heartbeat, the two women stared at each other across flickering gold fire and ancient stone. Then, unexpectedly, Seraphine smiled, very faintly. Perhaps the mountain truly did choose correctly, she murmured. Before Elara could answer, the throne tunnel trembled violently. Ancient runes ignited fully along the walls. The path had opened. Veyrath exhaled slowly. Once you cross the inner gate, only blood of the first flame may proceed farther. Elara frowned. And the rest of you? We wait. Cold unease crept through her. Alone again. Always alone at the worst moments. The old instinctive fear returned immediately that once she stepped forward, no one would follow. No one ever truly stayed. The bond at her wrist burned softly then. Kael's mark. A king's vow. The warmth steadied her more than it should have. Seraphine noticed that too. You already reach for him, the Queen Mother observed quietly. Elara looked away immediately. No. Another faint smile touched Seraphine's mouth. You lie poorly. Heat crept unexpectedly into Elara's face. Before she could respond, a violent pulse rolled through the bond again. This time sharper. Bine. Elara staggered slightly. Coil. Something had happened above the city. The connection between them flickered with exhaustion, rage, dragonfire, and blood. A lot of blood. Elara? Veyrath stepped forward sharply. She pressed one hand against the glowing bond mark at her wrist, breathing unevenly. Through the connection, she felt flashes only briefly. Kyle crashing through burning rooftops. Corrupted dragons tearing across the sky. Civilians trapped beneath collapsing towers. And beneath all of it, his terror. Not for himself. Fahia. The realization nearly stole her breath. The bond pulsed again. Mine. The possessive instinct hit harder this time, raw and almost desperate beneath Kael's exhaustion. Elara closed her eyes briefly. The mountain answered instantly. The tunnel before her blazed open with molten gold light. The throne was calling her now more strongly than ever. She looked once toward the surface tunnels leading to the city, toward Kyle, then stepped into the ancient passageway alone. The entrance sealed behind her immediately. Stone ground shut with deafening force. Silence swallowed everything. Elara froze. The throne tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, carved from black volcanic glass veined with glowing gold fire. Ancient murals lined the walls, women crowned in dragon flame, standing beside enormous beasts beneath crimson skies. The first rulers. The forgotten queens. As Elara walked deeper, the murals changed. War. Dragons burning cities. A king, crowned in black iron, driving a spear through a queen wrapped in golden fire. House Draven taking the throne. Blood spilled across stone. Elara's chest tightened painfully. The empire had built itself atop betrayal, so old it became law. The tunnel widened gradually into an enormous chamber, and Elara stopped breathing. The throne room beneath Mount Veyrath dwarfed every palace hall above it. Ancient dragon bones curved across the ceiling like cathedral arches. Rivers of molten gold flowed through channels carved into obsidian floors. At the center of the chamber rose the throne itself, not crafted, grown. Black stone twisted upward like dragon claws wrapped around a seat of living flame. Behind it spread enormous wings forged from molten gold, glowing softly in the darkness. The throne of fire. The mountain pulsed beneath her feet. Welcome home. The voice did not belong to the dragon god this time. It belonged to the mountain itself. Elara stepped backward instinctively. I don't want this. The chamber trembled softly. Neither did the first queen. The fire around the throne brightened. Visions exploded across the chamber walls instantly. The first Fire Dragon Empress, standing beside the dragon god beneath an unbroken sky. A kingdom united not through fear, but bond. Then the vision shattered into war. Kings poisoning dragons. Queens hunted through fire. Children branded into slavery. Elara saw her mother then, young, exhausted, bleeding as she fled through volcanic tunnels carrying an infant wrapped in gold cloth. Elara, herself. Tears burned instantly down her face. Her mother kissed her forehead once before, pressing the infant into another woman's arms. A servant, dressed in ashworker robes. "Hide her," her mother whispered desperately. "Please." The vision shifted again. Royal soldiers finding her mother. Flame. Seraphine watching silently while Veyrath turned away. Elara collapsed to one knee. The grief hit too hard, too fast. All this time she had imagined her mother abandoning her somehow. Instead, she died trying to save her. The throne pulsed. Pain births power. But what will yours become? Elara looked upward slowly. The chamber had changed. The throne now blazed violently with gold fire while molten cracks spread beneath the floor toward her feet. The mountain was waiting for an answer. "Atist. What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Truth." The single word echoed endlessly through the throne room. Then the fire rose. It wrapped around Elara completely, lifting her from the ground as visions crashed violently through her mind again. Not memories now. Possibilities. Cities burning beneath dragonfire. Kael consumed entirely by corruption. Black wings blotting out the sky while armies died beneath him. The empire kneeling before Elara, in fear. A queen ruling through vengeance. The fire whispered seductively, through every vision. "Make them suffer, as you suffered." The temptation terrified her, because part of her wanted it. After a lifetime of chains and humiliation and loneliness, power like this could remake the world. The throne sensed it instantly. Gold fire surged hotter. Rule through flame. Rule through fear. No one will ever hurt you again. Elara trembled. The temptation wrapped around every old wound inside her. Every moment she spent invisible. Every bruise. Every order. Every night. Wondering if her life mattered less because she was born powerless. Tears slid down her face. Then another feeling rose through the bond at her wrist. Kael. Pain. Exhaustion. And beneath all of it, faith. He believed she would choose differently. The realization shattered something dark trying to grow inside her. Elara lifted her head slowly through the fire. "I don't want a kingdom that survives by becoming cruel." The throne room froze. The flames hesitated. Then the mountain roared. The entire chamber erupted into blinding gold light, and the throne accepted her. The world exploded into fire. Gold light consumed the throne chamber completely, swallowing stone, molten rivers, and darkness alike, until Elara floated within an endless sea of living flame. Heat surged through her veins so violently she thought her body would tear apart beneath it. Then the mountain touched her soul. Not gently, completely. Every wall she had built across years of survival shattered open at once. The throne saw everything. The ash pits, the slave chains, the nights she starved quietly, so younger servant children could eat first. The terrible loneliness of believing no one would come for her, because she simply was not important enough to save. The fire tasted every wound and answered. Power flooded through her. Not borrowed power, inherited. Ancient dragonfire awakened fully beneath her skin, while molten gold spread across her arms in glowing patterns older than kingdoms. The broken slave brand on her shoulder vanished entirely beneath the crest of the first flame. The throne recognized its queen. Elara gasped sharply as the bond at her wrist ignited. Kael. The connection between them exploded open fully for one terrifying heartbeat. She saw everything. Kael, flying through the burning capital, with black wings tearing smoke across the sky. Corrupted dragons smashing through towers while civilians fled below. Blood covering his hands. And exhaustion. Gods. The exhaustion. He was forcing his dragon into control through sheer will alone, while the corruption inside him clawed violently toward freedom. Then she felt something else beneath all of it. Yeah, he was thinking of her. Not as a political solution. Not as a throne. As Elara. The realization struck her chest so hard she nearly cried out. The throne sensed the bond instantly. The fire surrounding her shifted. The visions changed. Elara saw herself crowned beside Kyle atop the dragon throne. The corruption fading from his blood beneath her touch. Dragons filling the skies above a healed empire. Then the vision twisted. Kyle, dying beneath black fire while protecting her from an army of nobles. The kingdom turning against them both. War. Blood. Love. Sharp enough to destroy nations. The throne whispered through the fire. To rule is to sacrifice. What will you surrender? Elara's breath shook. The question was cruel, because she already knew the answer. Anything for the people she loved. The realization terrified her, because there was already someone she loved enough to destroy herself for. Kyle. The truth settled quietly into her chest at last. Not sudden, not simple. Built slowly through every moment he reached for her, despite fearing himself. Every time he protected her before thinking. Every time he looked at her like survival itself mattered more because she existed. The mountain felt the emotion bloom inside her, and approved. The fire around Elara surged upward in towering wings. Far above the throne chamber, every dragon across Veyrath screamed together into the night sky. The coronation had begun. Outside, the capital burned beneath dragon fire. Kale crashed through the side of a collapsing tower hard enough to shatter stone across the street below. Civilians screamed and scattered while corrupted dragons circled overhead against a sky glowing red with volcanic ash. Blood poured steadily from the wound in his side. The corruption was spreading again. Fast. Without Elara near him, the fragile balance inside his body had begun collapsing almost immediately. Black fractures crawled visibly beneath his skin now, while smoke leaked from beneath his armor. A lesser man would have already transformed completely. But Kyle kept fighting, because the city still stood. Barely. He landed hard atop the broken remains of a sky bridge and looked toward the palace district. Fire everywhere. Yet amid the chaos, something impossible was happening. The dragons were hesitating, not fully attacking. Several corrupted beasts perched atop towers simply staring toward Mount Veyrath instead of continuing their rampage. Others lowered themselves strangely before civilians fleeing the streets. They felt it too. The mountain choosing its queen. A roar shattered the moment. KL spun sharply as one enormous corrupted dragon dove directly toward a crowded bridge filled with fleeing families. Too far. He wouldn't reach them in time. The realization hit like a blade. Then gold fire split the sky. The entire city froze. A massive wave of molten light erupted from Mount Veyrath and swept across the capital like dawn breaking through darkness. Every dragon in the air stopped instantly mid-flight, then bowed. Thousands of beasts lowering themselves at once beneath the burning sky. The people of Veyrath stared upward in stunned silence. And at the center of the golden fire above the mountain, a woman rose into the air, crowned in dragon flame. Elara. Gold wings of living fire spread behind her while ancient runes spiraled around her body like stars caught in orbit. Her hair moved wildly through the heat, glowing faintly with molten light, and beneath her feet the mountain itself burned gold instead of red. The city stopped breathing. Gale forgot how. Mine. The instinct slammed through him with devastating force. Not ownership. Recognition. Every dragon in his blood knew her now. Queen. The bond between them ignited fully across the distance. Elara felt his awe, his relief, and beneath both, love. The realization shattered through her heart so suddenly she nearly lost control of the fire around her. Kale loved her. Not because of prophecy. Not because of the throne. Hea, the slave Omega, thrown into a volcano. Tears burned briefly in Elara's eyes, before the mountain answered, with thunderous approval. Gold fire swept outward across the capital, touching corrupted dragons one by one. And where the fire touched, the corruption began burning away. The city erupted into stunned cries. Black fractures vanished beneath molten gold light. Dragons screamed as centuries of corruption ripped from their bodies in clouds of dark ash. Not all survived the cleansing. Some collapsed, from wounds too old and deep to heal. But many lived. Hope spread through the streets like wildfire. The throne had returned, and the queen had chosen mercy. Far below the palace, Seraphine watched from the mountain entrance with unreadable eyes, while Veyrath stood beside her in stunned silence. "She's purifying them," he whispered. Seraphine said nothing. Her gaze remained fixed on the sky where Elara floated above the capital wrapped in dragon fire. Then, slowly, the Queen Mother lowered herself to one knee. Veyrath stared sharply at her. "Your Grace." "She won," Seraphine said quietly. No bitterness, no rage, only exhausted truth. Throughout the city, nobles and soldiers began following the Queen Mother's example one by one as dragons bowed overhead. The empire was watching its new ruler rise, but not everyone accepted it. From the eastern palace tower, a horn suddenly sounded. Then, another. Kael's expression darkened instantly. The noble houses. Several war banners unfurled across the upper districts while armored dragon riders emerged from hidden courtyards beneath house banners loyal to the old throne. Panic spread immediately through nearby streets. "They're mobilizing. The nobles are resisting." One dragon rider launched into the sky and pointed directly toward Elara. "Kill the false queen." The attack began all at once. War dragons surged upward toward Mount Veyrath, while noble archers unleashed flaming bolts across the city. Chaos erupted again beneath the burning sky. Kael roared. Black fire exploded from his body as he launched upward to intercept the riders. But the corruption inside him chose that moment to break free completely. Pain ripped through his spine violently. Kael screamed as black scales erupted fully across his body. His wings expanded monstrously while horns tore upward through his hair. The beast inside him surged to the surface, at last beneath the stress of battle and separation from Elara. The city looked up in horror. The Dragon King was transforming. Kael fought desperately against it midair, but the corruption had gone too far this time. Black fire burst across the sky, while his dragon form expanded larger and darker than anything the capital had ever witnessed. The nobles panicked instantly. The king's corrupted. Kill him. Dragon riders turned sharply toward Kael instead, and Elara felt his terror through the bond. Not fear of death, fear of hurting innocent people. Kael lost control. The beast roared across the sky above Veyrath, and every soldier below raised weapons toward their king. The sky above Veyrath turned black with dragon fire. Kael's transformed body towered over the capital now, vast wings spreading across the burning clouds, while corrupted flame poured from between his jaws. His scales looked forged from obsidian, cracked open by molten light beneath, and his eyes, his eyes were no longer human. The beast had taken control. Screams erupted through the streets below as civilians fled beneath collapsing rooftops and raining ash. Noble dragon riders circled the transformed king from a distance, terrified yet desperate enough to attack. The Dragon King had become exactly what the Empire feared most, a monster, and Kael felt all of it. Somewhere buried beneath the beast's rage, his consciousness still lived. Elara felt him through the bond like a drowning man trapped beneath black water, fighting desperately against instinct, terror, and centuries of corruption ripping through his bloodline at last. "Don't come near me." The thought slammed through the bond violently. Elara hovered above Mount Veyrath wrapped in gold fire, heart shattering beneath the force of his fear. Not for himself, for here. Below, one noble commander raised his sword toward the sky. "Bring him down," he screamed, "before he destroys the capital." War dragons surged upward immediately. Kael roared. The sound shattered windows across the city. Black fire erupted outward from his jaws, swallowing 3 attacking riders instantly. Dragons screamed and spiraled from the sky, trailing smoke and ash. Panic spread everywhere. He's killing them. The kings lost control. Elara. Varen's voice echoed faintly from the mountain below. If the nobles believe the throne cannot control him, they'll declare civil war before dawn. Elara barely heard him. Her entire focus remained fixed on Kyle. She felt his agony through the bond now. Years of chained fury, finally unleashed beneath terror and self-hatred. The beast inside him was not merely violent, it was wounded, and worst of all, it believed itself unlovable. The realization nearly broke her. Another squad of noble riders attacked Kale from behind. Spears, carved with anti-dragon runes, slammed into his wings. Kale screamed, not rage this time. Fine. Black blood rained across the city streets below. Then the beast turned fully toward the capital. Elara felt the shift instantly. The dragon was preparing to burn everything. Not from cruelty. Desperation. If the city died, no one could hurt her. Mine. The possessive instinct thundered through the bond with terrifying force. Elara's eyes widened sharply. The dragon wasn't trying to destroy the kingdom. It was trying to protect her by eliminating every threat. And Kale was losing the fight against it. Below, Seraphine realized it too. The Queen Mother's face went pale as she watched her son circle above the city in monstrous agony. He's afraid, she whispered. Veyrath looked toward her sharply. Seraphine's voice shook for the first time all night. Every transformation, every chain we put on him. Her eyes burned with grief. We taught the beast that love ends in pain. The words hit Elara through the bond itself, and suddenly she understood the final truth. Kyle never feared becoming monstrous because of violence. He feared becoming monstrous because he cared. The dragon roared again and dove toward the palace district. Noble riders scattered in panic, while soldiers below raised massive anti-dragon ballistas toward the sky. No, Seraphine screamed. Too late. The first spear launched. A massive black bolt tore through the air, straight toward Kale's chest. Elara moved before thought. Gold fire exploded across the sky. The entire capital gasped as Elara crossed the distance between them in a streak of molten light and threw herself directly in front of the Dragon King. The spear struck her barrier instead. The impact detonated like thunder. Gold fire shattered across the night sky, while the force hurled Elara backward into Kale's enormous body. For one suspended heartbeat, everything stopped. Kale's monstrous dragon form froze midair. His burning eyes locked onto her. Elara pressed one trembling hand against his scaled face, despite the heat scorching her skin. And through the bond, she let him feel everything. Not fear, not duty. Love, raw, and devastating, and terrifyingly real. The dragon recoiled violently. Kyle's consciousness surged upward beneath the beast instantly. Elara. The brokenness in his voice nearly destroyed her. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed closer against his massive head while black fire raged around them both. You are not a monster, she whispered. The dragon trembled. The entire sky shook with it. Below, soldiers and civilians alike watched in stunned silence as the queen, crowned in gold fire, held the corrupted Dragon King between her hands. Another noble commander shouted furiously from below. Shoot them both! No, Seraphine said. The Queen Mother stepped forward before the entire army, then dropped to both knees. Lower your weapons, she ordered. No one moved. Seraphine lifted her voice across the burning capital. That is your king. Silence spread slowly through the city. The Queen Mother looked upward toward her transformed son, tears finally breaking free down her face. And she, Seraphine whispered, is the first thing that ever made him wish to live beyond the throne. The words echoed across Veyrath. Kale heard them too. The beast inside him faltered. Elara felt the exact moment his dragon stopped fighting her touch. The black corruption splitting his scales began trembling violently beneath the gold fire surrounding her hands. The mountain answered instantly. Ancient dragonfire swept upward from Mount Veyrath in massive spirals, wrapping around both king and queen alike, while every dragon across the city lowered itself completely to the ground. The bond had reached its final choice. Not domination, not fear. Union. The dragon god's voice thundered across the capital itself. The throne accepts them. Gold fire erupted through Kale's monstrous body. He screamed not in agony this time, but release as corruption burst from his scales in waves of black ash. The entire city watched molten gold spread across the Dragon King's body, while the ancient poison infecting his bloodline burned away. The beast beneath him changed. Not gone. Freed. Kale's massive dragon form shrank slowly through spirals of fire, until at last a human body fell from the sky toward the palace below. Elara! Voices screamed. She dove after him instantly. The wind tore through them both as Kale fell unconscious through burning ash and dragonfire. Elara caught him moments before impact, gold wings flaring behind her as she lowered them both onto the shattered palace bridge overlooking the capital. Silence spread outward slowly. The city stared. Kyle lay motionless in her arms. Black armor cracked apart, dark hair streaked with ash and blood. But the corruption was gone. No black veins. No monstrous scales. For the first time in his life, the Dragon King looked peaceful. Elara touched his face carefully. Kyle? No answer. Fear clenched through her chest instantly. Then his eyes opened. Gold, human, and completely focused on her. The relief that crossed his face nearly made her cry. Elara, he whispered hoarsely. His hand rose shakily to her cheek, as though needing to prove she truly existed. The entire capital watched. The king who had terrified kingdoms looked at one former slave Omega, like she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. Then slowly, Kale Draven knelt before her again. Not because of the throne, not because of prophecy, choice. The shattered bridge fell silent beneath the eyes of the Empire, as the Dragon King bowed his head before the Queen of Fire. And this time, the entire kingdom knelt with him. Dawn broke slowly over Veyrath, not red with fire, gold. The first sunlight touched the capital through drifting ash, while dragons circled silently above the city, no longer screaming in rage, but gliding across the skies like creatures awakening from a nightmare centuries long. The battle had ended. The Empire had not. That truth settled heavily over the shattered palace bridge, where thousands remained kneeling before Elara and Kale. No one spoke. The silence itself felt sacred. Elara stood motionless in the center of it all, gold fire still flickering faintly beneath her skin while the broken remains of the capital stretched endlessly behind her. Burned towers smoked against the horizon. Entire districts lay scarred from dragonfire. And yet, the city still lived, because someone had finally chosen mercy over fear. Kyle remained kneeling before her, not performing, not yielding politically. The bond between them had stripped too much away for falsehoods now. Elara could feel every emotion moving through him as clearly as her own heartbeat. Relief, exhaustion, wonder, and love so fierce it frightened him. The realization softened something deep inside her. All her life, survival meant expecting people to leave eventually. Kindness always came with conditions. Safety vanished the moment she became inconvenient. Yet Kyle had looked at a kingdom burning around him and still chosen her openly before the world. That kind of devotion felt almost unbearable. Seraphine stepped forward first. The Queen Mother crossed the ruined bridge slowly beneath the eyes of the capital. Ash streaked her black gown now, silver hair loosened by wind and fire. She looked older somehow after this night, more human. She stopped before Elara, then lowered her head completely. The throne recognizes the blood of the first flame, Seraphine declared clearly enough for the entire bridge to hear. And I recognize my failures. Shock rippled through the gathered nobles. The Queen Mother had never apologized publicly for anything in her life. Elara looked at her carefully. You killed my family. The words cut through the morning silence sharply. Seraphine closed her eyes once. Yes, No excuse this time. No justification. Only truth. Elara felt years of buried anger twisting painfully through her chest. Part of her wanted vengeance. Wanted Seraphine to feel the same helpless grief carved into her own life since childhood. The throne beneath the mountain sensed it too. Power answered rage easily. But Kael's hand found hers gently. The touch steadied her instantly. Not because he asked forgiveness for his mother. Because he trusted her not to become cruelty. Simply because cruelty had once shaped her life. That trust mattered more than vengeance ever could. Elara looked toward the kneeling empire. Toward servants, guards, nobles, ash workers, dragon riders, all waiting to see what kind of queen she would become. Then she faced Seraphine again. "Stand," Elara said quietly. The Queen Mother looked genuinely startled. "I don't forgive what you did," Elara continued. "But this kingdom has buried enough people beneath fear." Seraphine stared at her for a long moment, then slowly rose to her feet. And for the first time since Elara had met her, the Queen Mother bowed with genuine respect. Across the bridge, the people of Veyrath began rising slowly from their knees. Not because the moment ended, because something new had begun. Veyrath approached next. The counselor looked exhausted beneath the dawn light. Silver robes torn and ash-covered after the night's destruction. He stopped several feet away from Elara and Kael. "The noble houses are divided already," he admitted quietly. "Some will resist your claim." Kael finally rose beside Elara. The movement drew every eye instantly. No corruption darkened his skin now. No black fire leaked beneath his armor. The Dragon King stood taller somehow, without the weight of endless restraint dragging at him. Free, and the entire city could see it. Kael's gaze turned glacial. "Then let them resist." Veyrath studied him carefully. "You would risk rebellion?" Kael's expression hardened. "I spent my entire life preserving a throne built on lies." His voice carried across the shattered bridge. "No more." The words echoed through the capital. Nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Servants looked stunned, and the lower districts, the workers, stable hands, ash miners crowded beyond the palace gates, began cheering first. The sound spread rapidly through the city. Not polished court applause. Real voices. People who had spent generations unseen beneath noble rule, now shouting for the slave Omega who became queen. Elara nearly broke at the sound, because for the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere. Kael felt the emotion hit her through the bond immediately. His gaze softened. Dangerously soft. Mine. The possessive instinct curled warmly through the bond. Now not controlling, not violent. Protective. Reverent. Elara looked toward him despite herself, and the world narrowed instantly. Ash drifted through the dawn light around them, while dragons circled overhead, and an empire rebuilt itself below. Yet somehow, all she noticed was the way Kael looked at her now. Like she had become the answer to a loneliness he stopped hoping anyone would understand. The realization made her chest ache. Kael stepped closer slowly. Not king and queen now. Just Kael. Just Elara. "You came back to me," she whispered. His hand rose gently against her cheek. "I always would." The simplicity of it nearly shattered her, because no one had ever chosen her without hesitation before. Not fully. Not publicly. Kael leaned his forehead softly against hers, their bond glowing faintly between joined wrists, while the city watched in silence. "I should have stopped them at the altar," he murmured roughly. Elara closed her eyes briefly. "Yes," she admitted honestly. Pain crossed his face instantly, but she touched his hand before guilt could consume him again. "You still jumped into the fire after me." Kael laughed quietly beneath his breath, exhausted and almost disbelieving. "Apparently I make catastrophic decisions where you're concerned." A soft sound escaped her unexpectedly. Not a sob. Not a laugh. Something gentler. The first real warmth she'd felt in years. Kael stared at her like the sound itself might undo him. Then the dragon god descended. The entire bridge shook as the ancient creature landed atop the broken palace walls overlooking the capital. Its molten eyes swept across the waking city, before settling on Elara and Kael. The throne is restored. Every dragon in the skies bowed again. The god lowered its massive head toward Elara. Will you rule them? The question carried more weight than crowns ever could. Elara looked toward the city below. The burned districts. The frightened people. The dragons finally freed from centuries of suffering. And she understood then that ruling was not about power. It was about what kind of pain you refused to pass onward. She lifted her head slowly. Yes. The mountain answered with thunderous approval. Gold fire erupted across the capital, not destructive this time. Healing. Broken towers sealed themselves with molten light. Corrupted wounds faded from dragon scales overhead. The poisoned black cracks that once spread beneath palace stone vanished completely beneath waves of ancient flame. The empire breathed again. The dragon god turned toward Kael next. And you, Dragon King? What are you now without your chains? Silence settled. Kael looked toward the city he nearly destroyed, toward the people who once feared him, then toward Elara. And the answer came easily. Herse. The entire bridge froze. Elara's breath caught sharply. Kael did not look away. No embarrassment. No retreat. Just truth laid bare before the world. The dragon god laughed. Deep and ancient. At last, it rumbled. A king worth kneeling beside. Then the great creature spread its wings. The force of it sent golden ash spiraling across the dawn sky while dragons cried out joyfully overhead. With one final blazing roar, the ancient god ascended above the capital and vanished into the rising sun. Silence followed softly, peaceful now. Kael turned fully toward Elara once more. So, he murmured, exhaustion and affection threading through his voice. What does the Queen of Fire command first? Elara looked over the city carefully, then toward the lower districts where smoke still rose above damaged homes. Her answer came without hesitation. Feed the ash workers before the nobles. A stunned pause followed. Then, somewhere below, a servant started laughing in disbelief. Others joined. The sound spread rapidly across the capital until even hardened soldiers smiled through exhaustion and soot. Kael looked at Elara like he had never heard anything more beautiful. And beneath the first true sunrise Veyrath had seen in generations, the kingdom began again.